Hello, hello. This should be live now. That's why I'm talking. So this is Summoning Insight, and it's episode 16. I'm Thorin. I work for OnGamers. That's about all you need to know. My usual co-host, Monte Cristo. His team is in first place in LCSNA, but what's new, right? It's the same for half the season. But finally, some competitors are dropping out of this race, Monty. It started off like the Running Man or something. Live now. That's why I'm talking. And eventually, some obstacles took out some people, and you're gradually leading ahead. So how was your week? It must be one of the best weeks ever for you, Monty.
Yeah, it was good. It was good. You know, I didn't have a lot of expectations coming in. I think morale in the team was not great, but I think it was an important week, some important wins for us. I am relieved, I will say that.
I mean, that part's going to fucking suck in the CLG documentary for this year. Like, when you get the lead, you're supposed to be like, yeah, we believed in each other. We said, guys, we can do this. Like, I gave them sort of like the win one for the Gipper type speech, like, win one for Monty, rotate for him. You know, and then they won, and I believe in them, and I know we're going to Worlds, so we're going to win. That's what you meant to say, right, Monty?
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Okay, I thought so. I mean, what you're supposed to do now, Monty, is call the rest of the whole season like Loco does before those games when he's like, GG, we win the Champ Select. I believe we have won the game now. No, there's no possible repercussions that can come back on me from this tweet. I will hit enter. Anyway, we'll get into that later in the show. Don't worry, guys. So we're joined by a third person on this show. He's from Dignitas. Some people like to call him, you know, one of the best junglers in NA, like underrated continually in his career. I like to just remind people that he actually once played top lane for Dignitas, right after their most famous top laner just left, after probably the hottest streak of that guy's career. And so everyone's first introduction was like, who's this like guy who's not as good as Voyboy, and can we have Voyboy back, please? Is Voyboy, please Vubi? And then eventually they let him play a jungler, and we're like, oh, he is good at Champions. Phew. He is actually quite good at this game. His name is Crumbs. Hello.
Hello, Thorin. Hello, Monty.
I mean, and not to mention that in hindsight, the best part of the triple trade was Crumbs going to Dignitas.
Yes, he was. That's the insane part. Yeah. Like, what's funny is what's funny about that trade is that you can tell Dignitas is the one team who didn't really have any say in the trade. They basically had to react to like CLG took their player. Then luckily CLG had kicked a player to Curse, and then they had to go like, well, who do we get? And so they got Crumbs and said, do you want to play top lane even though he's a jungler? So what's funny is at the time it looked like, well, of all those three trades, obviously Dig got the worst end of it. You know, they didn't even get a player that played that position. But in the long run, who is actually still playing now at that original position that they were the best at? Crumbs is the only one, and he's like near the top of LCSNA now. So what do you think of your past in that sense?
I think...
Is it another life? Do you still think about it?
I think it was a good decision by me made in the past. That's all I can say about it. I had a pretty important say as to what happened, and I'm glad I took it.
What were your other options?
Stay.
Stay in what?
Stay jungler for Curse.
Wait a minute. What do you mean? They had St. Vicious?
No, I could have stayed, or I could stay or go. So I was like, okay. I can either stay or go. I can stay as a jungler for Curse, or I can play top for Dig. So I was like, well, I want to play top for Dig.
Well, I mean, maybe the less said about that decision, the better then. Okay, so moving on. So this season, Crumbs, for some weird reason, LCS NA is like repeatedly in a deadlock at top. Like, okay, last split, yeah, TSM and C9 used to battle for top place, or maybe like one was top, the other was top for longer. It was like the first and second the whole time. Why do you think
I'm pretty sure it's just C9 at the top the entire time.
Actually, TSM was top almost every week. It's C9
really
at the end. Yeah, they were only because they were one game behind because TSM won the first game of the split. Over, you remember?
That was such a shitty split. I can't remember.
Yeah, it wasn't good. What do you think is the reason from your perspective as to why the split's been so even overall? What do you think's changed?
More people are taking it seriously. That's the gist of it. There's introduction of better teams. The bottom teams before were much worse. The middle of the pack, the disparity they had between the top, nobody could really figure out how to beat Cloud9. Right? Nobody even gave a shit. It got to the point where it's like, well, we'll just be happy taking second place. Let's just take third place. Let's just stay inside LCS. That seemed to be the general consensus going into that. And then once people were satisfied with certain rosters and overall, and most teams were like, oh, okay, I guess we have a shot now. We can actually give it our all for this. And then infrastructure gets brought in, everyone's importing players, and then once that happens, I mean, when an organization is putting forth money to actually buy players, they're gonna push as hard as they can for the team to perform.
I mean, in some sense, your organization was way ahead of the curve on that mentality of like, let's just come second, let's just come third, let's just stay in LCS. Listen, guys, let's keep our jobs. Like, don't go crazy, don't try too hard. And then that was a joke, obviously. And then you thought to yourselves, well, we've got to get serious here. Now, who's available? C9 Meet Your Ego? Does he know anything about the game? Drunk Scara, that's right. Get him. He seems quite witty. Does he know anything about the game? Yeah, he does. Okay, get it. Bring him in. Scara, here's your new coach. What the fuck? Did that guy like take the piss out of me? Yeah, but we're at rock bottom, Bo. you got to go with what you got at this point, you know. What actually happened with that, Crumbs? Like, how did that guy get brought in?
Like, I get asked this so many times. I actually had no say in practically any of the team decisions that were made after the split.
Okay.
Like, I just went to no, I'm serious. I went to Vancouver for vacation after, like, as soon as the split was finished. I was like, fuck this, I'm out of here. So I need a break. So I just went to Vancouver, bought some tickets, spent for a month, and when I'm coming back, it's like, hey, we have 2 new players, Kit 1, we have an analyst, Scara's coach, let's go. I was like, oh, all right.
And did you know that guy at all yourself before he joined?
Never met him. I didn't even know that. I mean, I knew about the Drunk Scara Twitter account, but
was he actually in the house when you got there, or had he joined yet at that time?
No, I've never even seen his face.
Ah, okay. So he doesn't ever come to the house. He just does it all remotely.
He's like the Charlie from Charlie's Angels, just the voice.
What a diss that is, by the way, to Charlie from C9. I thought you were at least going to say he was Charlie from C9.
We can rename Dignitas as Cumley's Angels. I like this. I like where this is going.
So, okay, break this down for me then. If you have this guy who's an analyst and you have Scara, is there a set division as to who does what in terms of helping you? Do they just both collaborate and then they tell you one thing? Like, how does that work?
I mean, I don't know how they run it by, but all I know is that they discuss their information and then it's presented to us as a team, and that's how we absorb it.
Okay.
I mean, the primary focus for the team, I'd say, would be just to actually separate as much of the team stuff that isn't relevant to League from the players, so that the players have more time to actually focus into improving and just League in general.
So I've got a good topic to start on here, because obviously it's best to start usually on the player himself. Okay, so last split, when I actually looked at your numbers, and Dignitas, like you said, they were like middle of the pack pretty much. It's not like you had a bad split personally last split, but look at the solo laners you had then, look at the solo laners you have now, when you've got Zion Spartan and Shifter you brought in. Have you actually changed anything drastically yourself, or were you a similar level before, but you couldn't be as effective without the team? What was it like for you, do you think?
I mean, I feel like before I'd be playing more of a desperate. I think my player, that's a good way to describe it, just be trying to make something happen. And I honestly don't really even look at the numbers. I'm sure I have a lot of deaths, like really poor KDA, because half the time, in the majority of our losses, I'm just the one throwing myself out there. It's like, okay, let's just pray something happens at this point once it's already over. But yeah, I think the improvement in solo lanes just allows me to play much more comfortably, allows me to play the way I would have liked to play the game just from the get-go.
Monty, when you look at Dig games, say you're going to play Dignitas, you're going to break them down. How would you describe Crumbs' impact on a Dig game?
You just wait for him to gank top lane, and then you kill their bottom lane and take all the objectives.
But what if bottom lane spots the gank coming with a Twisted Fate ultimate, yet still...
I don't know what to say, man.
I got nothing to say. I'm just kidding, man.
Yeah, I mean, they're a very solo lane focused team, so that's where we tend to anticipate the ganks coming in, and we trust Seraph that even if he dies, he's going to be able to bring it back, and then he just mercilessly slaughter Kiwi Kid and Cutie Pie until Double Lift wins for us.
From your perspective, Crumbs, how would you describe to someone else? First of all, let's just add the caveat here. Like, yes, please don't tell us any secrets about Dignitas. We know it's halfway through the split, and you don't want to mess up this amazing championship that will surely be destroyed if you tell us who calls what and when. But ignoring all of that, just tell us what you can about what is Crumb's role from your perspective and the team's perspective. What is Crumb's job? What is he expected to do in a game?
I mean, I'm expected to do the majority of the decisions for the early game, and then besides that, everybody else has to chime in.
Okay.
If I can't oversee everything, if I slip up, which happens often, then somebody else does the same thing as well. Somebody else picks up the slack for that person. So it's kind of like a hierarchy system. It's not really one person has an incredible voice for another, but if somebody sees something while someone else is not on top of their game as making a decisive action, then somebody else picks it up for that person, and then we go on, and we pretty much that way ensure that we are on the right path, because we seem to all have a pretty decent understanding as to what we need to do to win.
In general, is it set so that you are supposed to be the primary engage for team fights?
What do you mean?
Like, are you the one who engages the fight? Is that the?
I mean, yeah, we'll look for a fight. I mean, typically the person that goes for a fight is the one that has an engage ability. That's typically how we do it.
But I mean, you play those champions?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm playing a champion that has an engage ability, I'll go for it. Sometimes I don't, but yeah, the majority of the time, if I have an engage ability, I will be the one starting a fight.
Okay, can we ask you something about a game in the past then?
For sure.
When you played that game against, was it Cloud9? Let me think. It was CLG or Cloud9, I'm pretty sure. You played this game where you played Nocturne, and we mentioned it on the show before, so I want to actually hear from the horse's mouth, okay? Which, by the way, doesn't mean he's a horse for everyone who's a fucking moron, doesn't understand how metaphors work. Language itself is a metaphor, believe it or not. These words do not actually represent anything. They are tokens which symbolize something. Therefore, every word is a metaphor. Therefore, everything is a metaphor, and as a result, it's not literal. So anyway, you remember the game I'm talking about where you played Nocturne, Crumbs?
I mean, you got to be more specific. You got to tell me, like,
it was like a week or two, maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago.
I'm trying to find it right now.
Yeah.
This split, really?
I'll remind you, folk here. There was a point where you were playing Nocturne, and you were over in your side of the jungle, and someone was killing Kiwi Kid, who was Nami, and he was under the middle tower, and then he died, and then you engaged right into them with the Nocturne ult, and then everyone just wrecked you in like 1 second before your team engaged.
It was Cloud9 versus Dignitas week 4.
Right, that game.
It was the RE game where Shifter Spirit rushed the opposite way of your Nocturne.
No, I remember that. What Shifter
that
did in that game is what, as a fan of Blaze, I've come to expect, right? Which is, you get these mid laners. You know, in the past, if a mid laner played a champion with a lot of mobility, it was like, wow, that's going to be really dangerous. You know, he's going to dash in there, he's going to move all in. We'll never be able to stop him in the team fight. Nowadays, you get these mid laners who play mobility champions because they're like, I'm getting the fuck out of here if there's any problem to me. My kid is saying safe. See ya. And then they get out of there. So, was this a one-off? Is there ever any disconnect between you and going into the fight and people joining you? What do you think on this topic, Crumbs?
I mean, I think at that point, that game was a really poor game from us regarding both picks and general ideas how the game was going to work. Because it got to the point where we ended up having a really shitty draft against champions like Nidalee. Like, what is Zyra going to do against Nidalee? Right? We had like kind of semi-hard engage. It's not really engage with Ahri and Nocturne, more of a pick comp. And we didn't actually think about what we needed to do to be able to guarantee these engages going on. And I mean, it got to a point, we're halfway through the game. I'm sure this was already by that point. We're just thinking, well, we're completely fucked right there. They have a Lee Sin with a roaming Thresh. I think they had a 2v1 in that game that was just able to get, if you get deep wars against a champion like Nocturne, similar to Rengar, you're just able to pretty much nullify the entire ultimate, and you know where it's going to happen. So I'm pretty sure by that point the game was practically lost. So you're just throwing yourself out there, trying to see if the opponent's gonna misplay. Because I think the game got to a point where it's so team reliant that if the team just actually knows what to do, you can pretty much shut down the opponent's chances to come back. And maybe that has to do with poor draft. Obviously, you can have better picks to ensure that you have more opportunities as the game progresses or as you fall behind. But there just comes to a point where you're pretty much done for.
In Monty, if you had to think of Dignitas wins and then you think of the losses, what would the factor be? Do you think that it hinges on?
When I watch Dignitas play, I think that they live and die by the performance of their bottom lane. And if their bottom lane can have a mediocre game, then typically the Shifter and Zion are able to get big and actually make the plays. But when the problem Dignitas that I see is that when they start to fall behind, it's extremely difficult for them to get back ahead. And we've talked about this on the show before. But while Shifter is the god of fantasy LCS, I don't think that he's willing to put himself in enough danger or commit to a situation that is necessary to come back. And instead, he'll play safe and then slowly lose the game. Like, you can take that 40% chance of taking this fight and maybe being able to come back, or you can take the 100% chance of never having that fight and then just slowly, like, choking out. And I think that's I would say the main problem is Dignitas, when they get behind early, has a really hard time of actually coming back into the game. That said, that said, I think you guys are good at getting ahead early, but playing from behind, I don't think is your strong suit.
So Crumbs, you're just front runners, and you can't come back in a game. No heart, no game to mind to overcome the challenges. Yeah, okay, jump in. Come on.
So, would you just say that perhaps we don't take enough risk if we're behind?
I do.
Or enough intelligent risk? Okay, yeah, I just wanted to know that.
What do you think of that? Do you have any response? Is he wrong? Do you agree with any of that?
I could agree with that. I could definitely agree with that, and especially not intelligent risks.
I have one thing to bring you up on.
It's like if you compare, for example, like when we got behind off of our really stupid fight against LMQ, a couple weeks ago, where we had that really dumb engage in the mid lane where we just like straight up all died in mid at level 3, and then we were constantly playing from a deficit. But the thing CLG, we died a lot that game, but we were constantly trying to take fights and create picks in order to come back, and we nearly did it. But I just don't see the same kind of risk taking from Dignitas at a deficit.
Is there any reason as to why that would be, Crumbs?
I mean, no. Any reasoning would simply be maybe we just haven't practiced it enough. But I can definitely see that point, and I'll definitely try to implement that into our practice. That's for sure. Because I can agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that Shifter is such a safe player that he does, rarely fall behind. So I can imagine that it's tough for you to practice those scenarios because you don't really encounter them that often.
Yeah.
In general, okay, one of the criticisms people would think from the outside, come on, Typer, mute the mic or something. So, one of the things people would criticize you for is, since your team upgraded with skill and got these new star players, people would probably think it makes sense, okay, maybe they front run, or maybe if they get ahead, it's very hard to bring a game back on them because they have such skilled players and they're ahead. In general, how much of the old Dignitas survived? Because one of the few things people used to credit the old Dignitas for was like a strategical approach or different way to think about a champ composition. How much of that survived to the new Dignitas, Crumbs?
I think if you're referring to the old Dignitas, I'm pretty sure you just mean like double split push. But besides that, I think we're able to just bring in new ideas that we have with our two solo laners while actually still maintaining the knowledge that we used before when we had, because we still have 3 of the, I guess, big first split roster with Kiwi Kid and Cutie and myself in the team. So the majority, and as well as Skara, who also obviously happened to be in all those splits, we know how we used to play the game back then. So if we ever want to apply anything that perhaps was old or any old strategy, we're able to do that.
Have you ever seen the point that Monty brought up there? Is something that I've actually noticed myself when I looked at games. Like, for example, I've seen games where Dignitas lost the game, and I would go look at the scoreboard, and I'm like, actually, Shifter's score's not bad even if he's lost. It might be like 0, 2, and 1. In that sort of a scenario, obviously it can depend to some degree on the champion, but is this anything that you guys acknowledge yourselves? Like, sometimes you don't... Like, in that sort of a scenario, if I'm the coach, I'd rather he was like 0, 8, and 1 and we lost the game, because then I know, like, okay, he really took some chances, some gambles to get back in this game. He didn't just say, okay, I'm behind, we'll just play that out, and then we never got the perfect chance to get back in the game.
I mean, I can agree completely with that. I think the ability to practice from behind tends to be pretty difficult, because I feel like just practicing in general, it tends to be just practicing different scenarios is often very difficult, just because it takes so much time, and typically in the scrims that you have, teams tend to play radically different from how they play in LCS. And
How would you characterize that then? What do you think an average team would play like? Is the one that plays really, really weird and then in LCS to play really standard, you know?
Well, I mean, I think Dignitas plays quite different in scrims than they play in the LCS from my observations.
I would
knows what I'm
say-
talking about.
I would say that happens to be mostly, for some reason, it just happens to be against CLG that we end up picking the weirdest shit every time.
Yeah, that was an interesting week.
Jungle Jace and Jungle Gallia did work.
So I have a question about that then, when Crumbs, which is that, okay, actually, historically, when I think of Dignitas, I actually think of them kind of how I described you there. Like a team that does weird things, and sometimes, listen, they're ahead of the curve and maybe they have a good cheese that no one's thought of, but in general tries to like keep throwing curveballs to the opponent. And that makes sense with the old lineup, because some of the iterations of Dignitas that have existed weren't as skilled as TSM or CLG or Curse or whoever was the other top team, okay? So you need to do something to have a little edge on them. And in that sense, it makes sense. But in this modern lineup, this Dignitas, in theory, might be the most skilled team in the league. They can skill-wise match up with anyone in the whole league. So as a result, wouldn't it make more sense for this Dignitas to be the one that's like, okay, here's our standard way of playing. Here are the champions we're always going to play if we can. We'll just play this out a million times and we'll trust that we have better players, we can execute better. Like, let's play by the book. Wouldn't that be a better approach?
I
Am
mean, I'm
missing
sure that's
something?
a way to actually play the game out as well. But I think that comparing what was about a year ago to now is radically different in the sense that now you can't actually win. I don't think you can win with sheer skill anymore. I don't think you can actually do that. You need to win simply by strategically outplaying your opponent. So even if we were just, let's just have a completely standard game, we're just going to end up having a cursed complexity snore fest of just 80 minutes of just nothing happening. I mean, obviously you could do something about it and make some plays here and there, but I don't think that just going by let's just completely play as standard as possible would be a way that we would like to play the game.
Okay, so you say that, and obviously it's a more tactical game with lane swaps and all that sort of thing. But immediately I'm going to have to ask this. If you win the game now through strategically outplaying your opponent, LMQ. What do you have to say to that, Crumbs? They're strategically outplaying people?
I mean, I haven't paid that close attention to the games, but the game that they played us, they actually beat. I mean, I guess you could say they actually beat us strategically by the fact that when the Gragas side in that top lane brush, that was a massive outplay for us. And then regarding the rest of the game, that we had some mistakes, but they had an idea going into it that we didn't capitalize on, and it got them ahead. So I'd consider that a strategic outplay.
Through this show, I know you might not have watched some of the episodes, but we've gradually discovered and then nurtured a sort of sickness in Monte Cristo where he has this bias towards Chinese people. When I say bias, like he thinks they're idiots, okay? There's something about it, like he just doesn't believe in them as a strategical country. You know, he thinks that China is weak. You know, the kingdom between heaven and earth is no more. That was the ancient times.
That's why I hate the Art of War, man.
Yeah, they still.
So what about China and Dota? China and Dota is like the kings.
Yeah, but China and Dota is known for, it's like long games and very mechanical play.
So here's the thing, Crumbs, is that when we talk on this topic, LMQ is always the one where Monty's like, I think they're going to drop off, like they won't keep this up. Like in general, when we had an episode just about Chinese LoL, LPL, he thought they were behind in terms of strategy. So if they're top of the league right now, from Crumbs' perspective, is there something that Monty misses that as a player you see about LMQ that's like impressive or something they do that different to other teams?
I mean, I wouldn't put LMQ as just like a crazily skilled team that strategically outplays any other team either. I actually wouldn't rate any team in LCS to be like some sort of incredible team. I think every single team in the split currently has massive flaws and simply plays better some days than other teams. So,
yeah, I think that is a story that we haven't touched on very much in the LCS. Is that all the teams have had really high points, but some pretty embarrassing low points as well. There's not a team that I think is really able right now. I mean, on a good day, they could compete on an international stage, but if one of those bad days shows up during Worlds, it's really going to be quite, I think. Because that agree. Inconsistency is just not there for anybody.
Okay, I don't buy that, though.
You don't buy that?
No. In the history of LCS, there have been 6 splits, 3 in Europe, 3 in North America, and now we're on the 7th and 8th now, the North American and European ones. Okay, in the history of those leagues, I think something like, I think it's Cloud9 and then TSM last split. So Cloud9 for 2 splits and TSM for 1 split have legitimately dominated and not had any inconsistency. Every other team in the history of LCS in all the splits, even if they ended up with 21 wins, had a period where they lost 4 in a row, or they went 1-3 or something, or they had a week where they had a losing week, or they had a week where they just went 1-1 and one team was a bad team. This has to be a function of LCS or League of Legends, the game. It has to be one of those two. You can't be consistent every time you play best of ones. Am I missing something here?
I mean, just the fact that they were consistent back then when the overall league was just at a much lower level is practically irrelevant, just because they still got smashed at an international level, both teams.
Okay.
So we just have to wait and see until this actual new international scene happens, because you're guaranteed 3 NA teams to go. But I do think that until the flaws in every team that will go to Worlds get fixed, that until each team is consistent or moderately consistent at least, there's not even going to be a shot, because Worlds will last multiple days. It's not just going to be, if Worlds happen in 1 day span, if one NA team has like the greatest day of their lives, yeah, I'm sure they could compete with the best teams at the time. But until, it's going to be days, weeks, months if they're doing the format with Taiwan, Singapore, and Korea.
Okay,
well, yeah,
but
it's going to be over a month, basically.
But what I'm kind of getting at there is, I'll just tell you straight up, I hate that answer when people give me it. Like, listen, anyone can win on any given day. You know, we just played badly today and they played better. Like, come on.
I would say it's more like anybody can lose on any given day.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just came off as a little bit
I
overgeneralized.
get it. That's why I'm just trying to get some more specifics here. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I think honestly that NA's performance at Worlds is going to hinge entirely on how effectively and where the team's boot camp heading into Worlds. I know that if CLG gets into Worlds, that we're planning on coming to Korea for as long as possible to boot camp and try and practice, against the Korean teams. And I think that really all Western teams should have that plan in mind as soon as Worlds is over, packing their shit up and coming to Korea so that they can practice together, they can be around each other in an immediate vicinity, and also have an opportunity to play against Korean and Chinese teams. Because the other thing, too, is that a lot of the Chinese and Southeast Asian teams have accounts on the Korean server, and that means that scrimming is going to be more available against these teams. Because that's the problem, too, right? If you think about it, because Worlds is in Korea, the Korean teams don't have to move anywhere, and they're able to scrim against each other, and they're able to scrim against their sister teams, and they're able to scrim against the other Asian teams. Whereas NA and EU, if they don't go anywhere, you're going to be scrimming against just the other teams from NA, if you're NA, and just the other teams from EU if you're EU. That is going to be the fastest way for the West to get crushed at Worlds this year.
I mean, you'd be scrimming the teams that didn't even make it too. Like, you'd be scrimming lower quality teams as well.
If they were even playing, you know how Worlds is. Those teams will just stop playing for 2 months. I doubt they're going to scrim.
I agree.
So what is the solution to that, Crims?
You go to Korea. If you make it to Worlds, you go somewhere that you're going to be able to have the most access to higher quality games, higher quality practice, and the answer to that is Korea.
Is this something that you even had thought of as a team?
I thought of it about 15 minutes ago when Monty mentioned it.
Oh, secret. Okay. This is all a live show, everyone. It's not prepared in any way. Let me just check in the script. Where is the... Okay, I'll talk about TSM later, right? Slam them later. Okay, so... Well, I have a question for you actually in general then. It makes sense at the top end. Come on, man. If you're going to type, fucking mute the sound or something. We can't handle listening to that when I'm talking. Like, when we do
Sorry. I just like to, cover you up a little bit. Okay. You need some censorship,
Okay. If you do the... Right, fuck it. Let's just talk about something else then. Right?
All right.
So, when you described the parity at the top of the league there, obviously, since it literally was deadlocked for the past few weeks, there's like 3 teams here, 2 teams here, or 4 teams here, 1 team here at the top of the league. Literally, people were beating each other every week, and it was going back and forth who was on top. What do you make of a team like Complexity, where their start to the season was fucking terrible, and then, listen, they changed a player, and then since then, okay, it's not like they're really awesome now and they're going to top the league, but they're having a weird scenario now where they somehow beat some of the good teams, and then they still are a bottom team. What do you make of their turnaround in the season, Krams? Have you noticed anything?
I think the change of the player was a positive direction for them, but I think it wasn't a big enough change to actually spiral them into just a massively better team. The meta changed in a way that they decided to play this style in which they simply try to make as little mistakes as possible, picking an incredibly late game team comp and just wait for the other team to basically fuck up. So they're able to take off wins off teams that are struggling to create their own winning conditions. A lot of teams get wins, including myself, including Dignitas, gets a lot of wins simply by punishing the other team's mistakes. Like you get some ward coverage out, and then you're able to just capitalize on, oh shit, look, they were going by themselves. They did this objective without wards, things like that, and you're able to just snowball big leads off that. But if the team chooses to simply do nothing, there's no mistakes to actually even go off. So then you're just lost, like, well, what do we do now? And if you're not able to make something happen, you just simply end up outscaling, which is exactly what happened when we played them. I think they've beaten us twice, but I'd count the first game that we lost to them not in the same style that they played, the same stalling style. But yeah, we weren't actually prepared to make a play to win the game, and they won because of that. And I mean, you can tell by the length that they have in their games that that's kind of what they do. And
I like to call this
the team comps.
I like to call this the SK Telecom S play style, which is actually quite similar to Complexity when you think about it. It's like they pick one early game top laner, like Renekton, and then they pick Ziggs, and then they just wait until 50 minutes.
Yeah, like that's a classic site that you run like Lee Sin Renekton, so you have like two strong early games that can they're pretty safe, they can defend against practically anything, and then you have like the two most late game 8 carries you can have from the mid lane and AD carries position, and you can literally do nothing the entire game, and then by the end game you just roll dice, and then it's like, oh shit, we won, we have late game.
Yep. SK Telecom S, man, they do the exact same thing. They're secretly not a very good team, but they just play for the late game.
I have a question actually about when you were describing there, like if you get like for example, say you have a lead and you can like pile on vision control and take away theirs, and then one of the old complaints, and I think was even said by Riot as one of the reasons as to why they wanted to change the trinket system, was that they thought it was like too hard to come back in the game. Like if you were behind and you were in your base, then the other team just bought if they're a really good team, bought 1 million wards, put them everywhere, and then even if you tried to push out and get a pick, like you wouldn't know if this brush was warded, and you just couldn't get anything going. Okay, essentially they could win just by out resourcing you. And so going to the trinket system, there's less wards overall. One player can't just put 1 million down. Has it actually changed the ability to come back? Has it made it easier to come back? Has it made it difficult in a different sense? What do you think on this topic?
I think it's kind of similar, but the ability to come back has to do a lot with just your team comp in general. I'd say like just removing a lot of vision is pretty pricey right now, especially because trinket is on a 3-minute cooldown. Half the time you're gonna have like 2.5, maybe 3 red trinkets early on. That's only 3 brushes to clear. One person can ward 3 brushes. You need the pink wards, and you need the ability to protect the pink wards. So literally one person can ward. Let's say one person drops 4 wards in one side of the jungle, 3 greens and a pink. It's going to take 3 people to clear all those 3, and a lot
That's
more
if they
people
make no mistakes with their lenses too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. Like if you fuck up, you're like, oh, I'm just gonna guess here. I'm guessing there's a ward here, and then you actually like misposition it, and you're not able to get it, or somebody fends you off from the last auto. Like, the ability to make a comeback if you're far behind, unless you can just simply turtle forever and do nothing, just going out and removing vision is borderline impossible if you're really far behind, and the other team is pressing the advantage.
What do you think, Monty, on that topic? What was it? Have I characterized it correctly? Like it was hard to overcome that?
It was definitely hard. I mean, because of the Oracle's advantage too in the last season, it's better now than it was, I think that's for sure. But yeah, there is definitely an element of that still exists. And, to build onto that too, the Oracle's lens, the thing that can sweep out those wards, gives you no combat stats, and that's a pretty large investment if you want to get it into the early game. And yeah, you can buy it if you have a crazy lead, but otherwise, if you're behind, Oracle's lens is often difficult to rationalize buying And it also sets you up, especially if you're behind, to only create picks, because at that point you lose so many stats that it's going to be even harder than it was before to team fight.
Have people figured out the correct formula now for when to have the warding trinket, when to have the sweeper, when to have the orb? Do you have a good hierarchy in your mind? Do you have a similar plan that you follow each time?
I mean, I think, yeah, obviously you want to start with typically five yellow trinkets, maybe one red, depending on what you want to do in level 1. And practically on every buy, jungler should almost always switch to red. Support can almost always switch to red as well if they go first item Sightstone. And then from then on, like mid laner, if they have a lead, can just switch to the red one as well. And you just, through the mid game, you typically want to have as many red sweepers as possible, just so to deny vision while purchasing pink wards. So the ability to have multiple sweepers with pinks gives one player the ability to deny 2 places vision, so denying and giving you vision at the same time, which if you get that big enough lead to actually sustain through all that, then yeah, fantastic. And then once you get to like crazy late game where everybody has 6 items, and I suppose you switch back to yellow so that you can actually buy wards, pink wards, because if it's super late game, nothing's more important than vision.
Did they actually do a good job with that in terms of like, is that variety useful enough? Have all the teams figured out now roughly what to do? Is there still a gap, do you think, between some teams knowing when to switch?
No, I think everybody switches at about the same points right now, pretty early on. I think the main thing that's still a problem is that the blue trinket isn't good enough, and it's only good in very specific situations or in the ultra late game when nobody has any space to buy wards anymore. Then, like, 3 blue trinkets is incredibly useful, because you have to think about it kind of as like a circle, where like the red trinket is greater than the yellow trinket, but the blue trinket is greater than the red trinket, and the yellow trinket is greater than the blue trinket. So if you can hit a timing in the ultra late game where everybody on the enemy team is switched over to reds and you're using blue trinkets for vision, then they just have reds and they're not actually clearing any wards, and it makes their trinkets useless. But if they switch all back to yellow trinkets, then you can't clear the wards, and then like it's all like a big cycle, right? Which I think is cool. I just think that the blue trinket still needs some buffs, probably.
Yeah, I tried using the blue trinket in a couple of games in solo queue. That is absolute garbage. Like, unless you're playing like Xerath and you need to scout somebody out as to how to hit your ultimate, it's not useful. The vision it gives is so minimal and lasts so little that there's practically no, unless super late game, there's no reason to have it.
So there's a trend, okay, I've noticed in League of Legends. It reminds me of something I used to see in Counter-Strike. Where you play max rounds 15, so the maximum regulation rounds a game can be is 30 rounds long. Now, because 30 is the max, any game which was won 16-14, which is obviously like to the limit of the 30, people who are commentators would always be like, wow, what an incredible game, right down to the wire, one of the best games we've ever seen, because it went so far. It seemed like the equivalent of winning a basketball game in the last second with a shot. They thought it was like that. So they used to say that it was always epic. The equivalent in League of Legends is any game that passes the 50-minute mark and gets near the hour. The commentators are like, wow, this is incredible stuff. This game's one of the game for the ages. Even if it was actually like a terrible game where both teams can't close the game out and one doesn't even seem to understand what their comp does, and the other one's picking fights when they're ahead, and they have a comp that isn't even a team fight comp. And so we had a game recently, Crumbs, which must have been one of the best games ever. Complexity played this game versus Curse. And listen, it's one for the ages. We'll all remember and tell our children stories of what happened at 10 minutes and what happened at 20 minutes. It was a fucking abomination, right? This is something that should not have been. It's like Frankenstein's monster. Like, Crumbs, tell me the truth about this game. What the fuck was that shit?
Did you see there's a Reddit? Like, I like to look at sometimes the post game Reddit links, and there some of the pictures that were linked in that Reddit post are pretty hilarious regarding that game.
Did you see the Simpsons one?
Oh yeah, that's exactly
that was the best one, where they were all stood around and it was all the 5 teams who were at the top of LCS. I'm just telling everyone who didn't see it. And then the two people in the middle were both monkeys. Calm down. There was 2 monkeys there, and what happened was all the people who were stood behind had like the logos of the teams, so Dignitas, LMQ, CLG, the top teams, and in the middle, the 2 monkeys fighting with knives was Curse and Complexity, and they were like cheering them on, like yeah, which kind of did sum up that game, right? Everyone was like, well, no losers in this game.
I mean, I just remember rewatching the game, and I was like, "Oh man, this is the fight where they had it. They had it. This fight. This is the fight. It was like early game fight. And it's 48 minutes in was the team fight. Like just some ridiculous fights that happen. I mean, that's just exactly what I'm talking about. Nobody knows teams that are just used to simply winning off opponents' mistakes. And if the other team just decides to make more mistakes, like just mistakes thrown on top of each other, nothing happens, and you get 80, like 90-minute stall fest to just, what was it, like 700 CS? Like, who the fuck gets 7? Telling you, if that
I
game
told
goes,
you, dude, it's SKTS. Did you know that Robert X. Lee beat Easy Hoon's 700 CS record in that game? It was a shorter game, I think, with the SKTS game.
I mean, I think we can
Maybe
assume
like
it was a
5 or
shorter
10
game.
minutes
Monty.
shorter.
if the game went any longer, I'm pretty sure the game wouldn't have registered 1,000 CS. It would have just been stuck at 999.
So here's the
Yeah,
funny thing.
I wonder
yeah?
if that's possible. What happens? We've never seen the quadra-digit CS.
I think someone said it crashes or something, but they might have been joking because, like, you know, those old arcade machines that can't go over a certain score. Maybe what happens is once you get to 999 CS, as it ticks onto the last CS, the Baron disappears, and then Morello comes out of that pit, and he's like, "You have unlocked my secret realm," and then it turns into like Dominion, because at that point you need it to become fast and fun. It's become boring and slow at that point. Just some old jokes there from Reddit. So
Well,
actually,
that was a fun game though. I'll give it that much.
here's what's genius about that game, though. It's almost like you'd think because it lasted so long and it's so memorable, that would be a great game for Riot, right? That's a great game to script, to have like a unique memory. Actually, it's the opposite. Monty, you know, if you're a boxing promoter like Don King, you actually don't ever want two really good fighters to fight right away, right? What you want to do is have a storyline like, oh, everyone wants to see them fight, but they're going to fight in a year when they've each had these 3 warm-up fights that they're definitely going to win. And then after they've been built up, that's when you want them to face each other, right? When they're at the peak of their power, so you can get the most views and the most people are hyped. So in this match here, we had 2 teams coming in with incredible hype. They're both bottom 3 teams, but of the bottom 3, these are the 2 where people are like, wow, maybe one of them's going to go on a run and join the top 5. You know, Curse has been beating all these top teams. They had a hot streak. Complexity's beating like Cloud9. They're getting really wins. You know, one of these teams could do it. And so it's like you took the 2 teams like that, then you put them together, and you were like, come on, guys, just whoever wins here, you know, you get to be the team who's going to join the top teams now. And they're like, okay, we'll give it our best. Let's showcase our skills, guys. And then they were like, oh, neither of us are capable of closing a game. This is really bad. And then everyone who watched it was like, okay, back to watching the top 5 teams play. When does TSM play CLG? Like, you know, like all the hype was lost. Like, do you actually buy it, Crumbs, that Curse can finish top 3 at the end of this split? Do you believe that?
Top 3?
Yeah.
No.
In the playoffs, I'm talking about, you know, to get a world spot. Is it possible?
They'd have to get lucky in the playoff match.
Like, is there a team that they could beat in a best of 3 out of the top 5?
It's best of 5 now, but since the fact that it's best of 5 makes it even less likely.
Yep.
So I would not agree with that.
And then if Complexity get there likewise, they would be the absolute outsider of the 6.
I don't see it. I just see the top 5 teams that we have right now are the top 5 contenders for.
I
the
think
top
that
spots.
the issue is with a team like Cursor Complexity that they simply don't have the depth, and that I think that even if they were able to take one game, as soon as you figured out the proper bans over the course of a best of 5, they would just get wrecked.
I agree.
I actually wrote a little piece the other day, just looking at simple stats. When the top teams were the team top 5.
Is this the all the TSM fanboys are at the light on fire, dude?
Yeah, whatever. That's standard. So we did a piece, and we talked about on this show before, where when the top was deadlocked, like either like there was like all 5 with that, there was 3 for first place, or there was 4 for first place. A way you could look at the league was you could just look, okay, what's the record of the top 5 teams amongst each other? And if you looked here, what was weird was, even though Cloud9 were the one team who weren't in the top, they're tied when there was 4 teams at first, they were the one who had by far the best record against the top 5. Meanwhile, TSM was tied for first, but they actually had the worst record against the top 5. So I want to ask you this question. Even though Cloud9 have had weaknesses, like they've lost to Complexity, if it's best of 5, it's the playoffs, could you see a reason as to why Cloud9 would be... Are they still the best team in a best of 5 scenario for you, Crumbs?
I'd say TSM's the best team for us in the best of 5
No,
scenario.
I mean, as in, would they be the best to win? Would they have the best chance, you think, of all the 5 teams?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. I actually think that all 5 teams would be like, you put some luck here and there, all 5 teams are capable of beating each other. Like, you can take the track record that each team has in the current LCS to perhaps create odds as to the chances that one team is to beat another. But I do think that the top 5 teams, C9 included, can just win the whole playoffs from everybody else.
I think that it's really going to depend on the momentum after the last Super Week as to what happens. I actually think that that's going to be the most critical thing, because everybody is so deadlocked right now that there should be a lot of confidence from teams who do well in the final Super Week as to what actually happens. I mean, personally, because Cloud9 tends to do stylistically well against CLG, like, I'm the most, at the present moment, I would be the most concerned about playing against Cloud9. And then after that, and the other reason that I'm concerned about playing against Cloud9 as CLG2 is that Cloud9 has like a million times more experience in a best-of-5 format than we do, because there hasn't been a best-of-5 format that CLG has really been able to compete in.
Well, they did play in that promotion match to get back into the league.
Yeah, that was it. So, you know what I mean? Like,
okay.
And like, how many people were on the team? 1, 2, 2, 2. Who are still on the team, so that's very different. So the best of 5, and because all the members of Cloud9 have stayed the same, and they've competed internationally, they've competed in the best of 5s, they've played the best of 5s that used to only be, you know, in the finals of the LCS seasons. That's incredible experience. I mean, you love to bring up the stat, like, we only saw the original like M5 Gambit roster play how many best of 5s or something? Like, Western teams don't play best of 5s.
So
you brought up, I'd just like to barge in here. You brought up the point that you thought the playoffs would have to do with momentum that was brought in from the last Super Week. Now, of course, I'd say that the momentum has a big part in it, but the fact that I'm pretty sure it's a month plus that playoffs get played after Super Week, that a lot of the momentum, perhaps maybe motivation, carries through, but I don't think that is a massive factor as to the results in playoffs.
Or the playoffs are being played over multiple weeks this time, though.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're a team that gets a bye as well, like,
that's true. That's true.
You play so in such a long time.
You know, it's going to be really interesting to me if there's going to be a new patch for playoffs or not.
I'm sure there probably will be. I mean, this week Nidalee got enabled, so that shit's going to be fun.
When you said that TSM would be the most favorable for you to play in a best of 5, now listen, obviously they're the team that you've beaten the most and you haven't lost to, but is there something actually about the style of their team that matches up well for Dignitas?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, the team tends to play, I think they just make desperate mistakes, really, and then we're able to capitalize on that. I think that's what happened in most of the games that we played against them.
Okay.
So,
can you give us an example that comes to mind when you say that? Is there like one play that you're thinking of, or a general
I can just remember
trend?
multiple times some of their players just simply launching themselves at us like late game without understanding the tanking capabilities that their champions have.
Okay.
Like an incredible late game situation that just is like, okay, a free kill right here gives you a win. Okay,
that's called the insect phenomenon, right, Monty? That's like where you have a chance to win the game and you're just like, fuck it, I'm just going in under the towers now anyway. Like, don't close the game out. Do you have any thoughts on this topic, Monty? Have you noticed this trend? Can you corroborate? Do you have a different story?
No, I think that's mostly true. I mean, I don't really have anything too much to add to that.
No, why would you? You know, it's only a talk show. Anyway, so I'll just keep generating all the topics myself, shall I? I know the least about fucking League of Legends on this show, but you guys play in the league and coach the league. But yeah, let me just tell you about what TSM does, for fuck's sake. Anyway, so let me think of more questions to ask that no one can answer. So when I did this stat that we brought up, which was that TSM, when I did the piece, it was before this week. So TSM had won 2 games out of 9 overall against the top 5. And since then, they played 2 more games against the top 5, and they went 1-1. So now they're 3-8 in wins and losses. They're 3 out of 11. So overall, they're still by far the worst record against the top 5. Aside from your team, where you're saying you think you have an advantage over them, Crumbs, is there something that's changed about TSM as a team from the team that was dominating last split for most of it? Is there something noticeable that's changed, either with a player that's come in or out, or have they changed the way they play the game that's different? What would you put it down to as to why they're not beating the top teams?
I mean, I'd say absolutely, but I just think that, I mean, shit, giving that much thought to another team is something that I haven't. I mean, most of the time I'm just trying to think about how can I improve on myself and my own team instead of what mistakes are other teams playing and how different are they from last play, right? That's not something that I'm not going to bed and be like, shit, how's TSM's changed?
Okay, well, humor Uncle Thor in here and just think for a second and then see if you can come up with a good answer for me here.
I mean, the main role would obviously be that the difference between, I think, Special and Gleaver is practically, I mean, it's support player, and they're both doing a good job at it. I'd say that just the difference in playstyle have to be Amazing with Oddone. Oddone much more supportive, while Amazing is also playing a supportive style with a more aggressive champion pool. So I think that changes the playstyle that they have by just pure champion selection.
Well, I would say not only that, but the difference, not in terms of individual or mechanical play, but just in terms of shot calling from losing Xpecial and losing Oddone, these veteran players on the team, has been damaging. No matter how good Glebe has gotten, he can't replace a player who's been a voice in a team for many years and has much more professional experience, who is exposed to many more scenarios within the game. That's something that takes an incredible amount of time. I can tell you as a coach, it's something that takes a long time to develop in a player because it just takes exposure to all these different experiences. And you can sit down with that player and you can watch VODs and you can say, this is what you need to do in this situation, or this is the shot that should be called. But TSM shot calling has not been spectacular. And their in-game communication, I think, just hit possibly an all-time low when they played against us this last week, because their coordination around Twisted Fate was just awful.
I mean, I think the fact TSM tends to have a pretty solid early game. You know, they don't get a crazy lead, or they're either a little bit ahead or just even, which is fine. Most of the team counts that they take are perfectly fine to take that. But just seeing them losing rotations, like sometimes some teams can just fuck up rotation. They're like, okay, you lost the turret for it. That's fine. But seeing the Cloud9 game that they had against Cloud9, in which they went straight down middle, where Cloud9 was completely undefended, they took a free inhibitor, and sneaky solo Lucian manages to push a tier halfway through the tier 1 to tier 2, takes out a tier 2, a tier 3, an inhibitor solo, and they don't even get anything out of it. That is a massive flaw in.
sounds like our game versus you, actually.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, we fucked up right there. That's for sure.
So I mean, even at that point, that's something that obviously has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed with many teams.
So speaking of things that have to be addressed, so TSM has lost every game to Dignitas. They're 0-3. Now there's one team that Dignitas is 0-3 against, called CLG.
I just like to ask this, Joe.
Yeah.
What is TSM and CLG's record to each other? Is it 2-1 CLG or 1-1?
2-1 CLG.
CLG 2-1.
Okay.
Do you have a theory as to why CLG's held it over you so far?
If I have to recall, the first game we played against them,
Please do recall, Ronald Reagan. Please do.
Oh, yeah, I'm recalling. First game we played against them was we really failed to even identify how our team comp needed to win. And they ended up basically winning off one of them. I made a mistake, got caught out, and then from then on we failed to identify how we were going to win. So we lost that one. The second game, again, we overcommitted for a dive, primarily myself, and we lost with that. And then the third game the game was pretty much even, and then we took a poor dragon fight. After that second fight with the team comp that they had, we ended up just losing off that.
Monty, let me set the stage here, because I like to refresh people's memory before we just talk about current events. At the beginning of the season, in the first few episodes of this show, that status I described about LMQ there, Dignitas was at that status for Monty. He was like, yeah, they're winning now, but listen, just wait a minute, They had a nice start to the split, but people can have a nice start. It doesn't necessarily hold up. And then at some point, something turned the corner for you with Dignitas. You went, okay, they're legit now. They're one of the top. In fact, then you started predicting, okay, they'll be one of the 3. I think they'll go to Worlds. At the beginning of the split, what was unconvincing about Dignitas? And since your team still beats them now, is there something that you have a sense of about Dignitas that other people haven't figured out yet?
No, I really think it's a stylistic mismatch between us and Dignitas because I think that our solo laners know how to play from behind, and I think we have a better bot lane. And so, like, we're comfortable in a position where our solo laners get ganked early in exchange for taking objectives or making our bot lane strong. And I think that we just kind of strike at a vulnerability in Dignitas that other teams aren't able to attack as specifically as we can. And I just think it's a bad stylistic matchup, just like I think for us, like Cloud9 is a bad stylistic matchup for CLG, just because I think that Cloud9 is very good at controlling objectives and better than us in a lot of times. So we end up like they're more timely about how they place vision and how they set up for objectives, and then we end up losing fights around those objectives. But as for what turned for Dignitas, I mean, obviously before the season started, I was unaware that, and everybody was at the time unaware that Dignitas would be getting more support people and life coaches and other kinds of coaches as well with the team to solve the major problems that they were having in terms of that both Dignitas and Coast were having in terms of their shot calling. So that I had to see it in action in order to make me change my mind, because for me, the first thing to do was to get used to the strength for other teams, to get used to the strength of Zion and Shifter in lane, and also to see Crumb's synergy with these two players. And I think that at the beginning I was unconvinced because it was just other people getting used to laning against them within the context of Dignitas, and then maybe you can pull out a win just through sheer overpowering, but that people would identify what the strengths and weaknesses of who this team were down the line. Now that said, I think Dignitas did address a lot of their issues and is looking like a much stronger team right now. And I still think we'll probably make Worlds. I just think that like CLG is Dignitas' kryptonite. Not that Dignitas is a bad team; they're just a bad team against us.
I can agree with that when you said about the stylistic matchup. I mean, when we go into preparation for CLG, like, well, we know that we have a stylistic like. They strike at the place that they should strike. Well, they have strong defense as to where we want to strike against them. So that's pretty much that sums up the matchup fairly well.
So Monty, give me the really concise version. Like, you know, in basketball games at the beginning, when they describe a team, they'll literally just put like a sentence, like, okay, star player is this guy. Like, this is the weakest part where they have to defend, and to win this game, here's the third key. They have to like keep momentum or something like that. Or go keep the pace fast. What would the quick, concise version of what you just said there be? Like, what would be the two strengths and a weakness of Dignitas?
Two strengths are strong solo lanes. Ability to snowball with a lead, and the weakness is bottom lane tendency to die.
Okay, so when you say that, let's hypothetically, we'll bring Crumbs in on this in a sec. Let's hypothetically pitch other teams from the world who might face Dignitas and figure out which ones would be the CLG to them, which ones would have the strengths in the right place in this to exploit those weaknesses. So we're looking for a strong bot lane to start off with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And solo laners that can play from behind or are decent. So, okay, immediately I'm thinking Samsung White.
Yeah, Samsung White probably.
Something fucking Korean. That's
Samsung White. That's a bad team for them.
Yeah, but yes. Yeah,
what do you mean,
especially yes, because the dual lane is very aggressive as well. So, and the dual lane likes 2v2ing.
And then anyone Chinese, strong bot lane, EDG.
There are a lot of strong bot lanes in China, so I think that would be a bad matchup in general. I actually think that maybe a Chinese team would be toughest for Dig.
Which one of the Korean teams would Dig do the best against, do you think? I mean, we're imagining it'll be Blue, White, and SKTK, so admittedly those are three fucking amazing teams, but which of the three would they have the best chance against from Monty's perspective?
Probably Blue if they got into a 1v1, because I think that Zion would do okay against Acorn.
Oh my gosh, I hope every hypocrite on Reddit just melted down there, considering how much shit they were talking on Flame, my lovely Flame, when Acorn won OGN, like, oh, Acorn is the best top lane in the world. Monty just suggested that Zion's going to beat him 1v1.
No, I did not say that. I said do okay. I did not say beat him, please.
Dude, do okay is pretty good against the person they're saying is the best in the whole world.
Well, I think Acorn is because I've watched him play for a really long time, and in a 1v1 setup, he's pretty mediocre. He was just very smart at the lane swap, and still is very smart at the lane swapping meta. That's why Samsung Blue was so successful, was because as a team they were able to make decisions that got Acorn ahead and made Acorn look good because they figured out lane swaps faster and better than pretty much any other team on the planet. So that was where Acorn's like strength came from, I think.
So, okay, we've done China, we've done Korea. I'm going to bring Crumbs in a second, but I want to get Monty's take first. So it's like unadulterated. He doesn't want to just agree with something Crumbs says and be political. So there's one region left, Monty, and it's Crumbs' favorite region.
Brazil.
Let's imagine, yeah, obviously. Yeah, you like to go down there during the summer. Like you were saying, what happens usually, Crumbs, is you play the split, and then you're like, oh, what did we get? Like 12 wins, 14 wins. I guess we'll try this playoffs. Shit, lost to TSM Cloud9, right? And you're like, right. Fuck this, I'm out here, guys. See you again next split. Don't get relegated. And then you go down to like South America, and then you just you party with some white girls, you chill, you kick back, you relax, you drink a little bit of that crazy hooch, and then you come back for the next split rejuvenated. You look a bit worn out, like you haven't seen your bed in a few weeks, but no, that's just you've been enjoying yourself, you've letting it go, So anyway, in this sort of a scenario,
You gotta relax, right? You gotta take your mind off the game.
No, so the real region that is Crumbs' favorite and that he pays precise attention to because he would never make a statement that he couldn't back up with stats is he loves to watch European LCS. I consider him a connoisseur of the European scene. He's an expert. If you ever go into his room, like he says, he doesn't really look at like CLG when they're playing other teams.
It's a closet. It's not even a room.
He doesn't think about why is TSM better. That's because inside his room, like in A Beautiful Mind when he went crazy and he had all those posters on his wall and there was all his connections. That's like EU LCS on Crumbs' wall. He's got pictures of like Froggen and then like a line that goes from Froggen to like Expeke and it says like some crazy shit in like Spanish or something, and then he got all this information up there. So what I'm trying to get to here is Monty, Alliance, Fnatic, SK. Which one of these teams would do best against Dignitas?
Probably Fnatic. Just based on Alliance's current form, and Alliance seems very confused about how to play standard lanes right now for whatever reason. So I think Dignitas would do quite well against SK, though. I think you could just straight up overpower them.
Okay. Well, I mean, we had a young man on this show last week who suggested that, I'll just quote precisely, we, square brackets, Fnatic and Alliance, would shit on Dignitas and CLG.
And NA. All of NA.
And what did you think about that, Monty? You didn't really respond that much to that.
Well,
Is there even a response to that?
There's a response.
How can you even take something so drastic seriously in the first place?
I know. I mean, he's almost suggesting that the whole region's behind.
Yeah, I think that's really hard to say. But in Fnatic's current form, if they can keep it up, I think they may once again be the best Western team. Alliance looks really shaky right now, though. I mean, they're on a pretty large losing streak, and that's not encouraging going into Worlds when... And it's most puzzling because they just can't seem to understand how to play a standard lane scenario, which is weird.
Do you ever watch EU LCS? Jokes aside, Crumbs, do you watch it at all?
I do. Yeah, I watch it sometimes. I mean, if it's when I wake up, it's like, oh, I want to watch some League, I'll go watch EU LCS. I pretty much just try to watch it for champion picks, see if they're picking something crazy that I haven't thought of, or... some days they have really interesting games. Like, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago where Copenhagen Wolves had a nice roaming Braum with Lee Sin. I thought that was really interesting to watch. But with the exception of that, there aren't really that many games that are just like that. That's really stand out. I benefit more watching, like staying up late and watching LPL than watching like NA or EU.
If you had to shadow box those top three European teams there, SK, Alliance, Fnatic, which do you get the sense Dignitas would do better against?
Man, you ask me so many questions about other teams. Like I can't express.
Well, I mean, we've already seen what
how
happens when you try to ask Dignitas players about Dignitas. It's like asking someone if they were involved in the Kennedy assassination. They're like, I don't, sir, I do not recall.
Like,
I believe that is a
you can
state
ask me
secret.
more about Dig. Like I really don't even
Okay.
give like I don't think shit. Could we beat this team? Like
Okay.
how good are they compared to us? Like
Okay, yeah, you're right. We've been taking the wrong approach here. I've been trying to make this like a general talk show and talk about things, but you're like, shit, Playboy, I don't give a fuck about those teams. What you ask me about my boys? What are we doing? We doing good. We're top of the league. Good. Ask my balance, motherfucker. Like, okay, so we're gonna ask you about you now, Crumbs. We'll ask about Dignitas. Let's get in there. Okay, we warmed you up. We're the first Dig players actually asking us to ask him about Dignitas. Okay. So when we had this guy who's in the top right-hand corner of your box here, who so far has already fucking appeared in this episode more than he did in his own episode and maybe said more about Dignitas, Zion Spartan behind you, he was like super cagey about even revealing who does shot calling, who says what when in the game. Is there even shot calling Dignitas? Does everyone just fucking mind meld and then inside their minds they know what to do? Like, we couldn't get anything out of the young man.
Well, I mean, it's because, whenever we talk about Dignitas on this show, it costs the Dignitas organization $1,000 an hour. So
listen,
it's expensive,
They know that, listen, like, knowledge is power. Loose lips sink ships.
I mean, I feel like most of the information gets slowly whittled down just by sheer features that you get into. So
Okay.
eventually, it all gets told.
So, give me a sense for you. Last split, you didn't have Zion Spartan, and we've heard that Zion Spartan played some kind of a shot calling role in Coast. When you brought him onto Dignitas, was he going to be involved in shot calling in some scenarios? Is there a certain sort of a scenario where it makes sense for him to make the call? Can you characterize it for us?
I mean, I'm sure it obviously does make sense if that's what he used to do in Coast. But again, when he was brought in, I was not even a part of this entire decision. I just simply I was told okay, well, sure, let's do this.
Okay, and so you said before, in the early game you make calls. What would be the difference between a scenario where Crumbs makes the call and Zion makes the call? Like, does Zion decide when you do a gank on his lane? Do you tell Zion when you do a gank on his lane? Is there a set hierarchy there?
It's kind of both. I mean, if he sees something that I'm not seeing, like I can say, you know what, I can go for it. No, I can't go for it. I have better plans to do. Or like, oh look, can I go to this? Can I go do something in your lane, something to open while I'm like far away? I'm like, okay, I'll map it out. Try to get there around like a minute from now. Things like that. I mean, everybody tries to make a good decision in the game, so we all have a say. That's, I mean, I feel like you want a really specific answer, but I'm giving you the most specific shit you can have. Like, yeah, we all make, like, obviously make more decisions from the position as jungle and support happen to be just the primary, most important people in the beginning of the game, right? So you're gonna make more decisions and be more vocal at that time. But as the game progresses, more and more people, okay, look, this is happening. Let's do this. Let's do that.
In 2013, Skara told me that I'm a Cutie Pie was the most respected shot calling voice in the team. Like, everyone would contribute things in game, but if he made a call, people thought, okay, his calls are more accurate, or he's got a better sense for the game in some scenarios. Was that just the old Dignitas? Does he still play a decent role? Because people think AD carry is the one role where usually it isn't having an input in shot calling. From that aspect, what's that like in that? Is he a unique AD carry in that sense? Is he not using it as much? What do you think?
Yeah, I think contrary to popular belief, he actually has a lot of intelligence in the game. All he does is play video games. Like, if you follow the guy, all he does is play video games. So he has a really good sense as to how to actually play. Does he have the ability to give you the information in the silver platter? No, but every time he says something, it's typically a really good call, and you follow it. Just because when you think of, like, maybe he says something, like, you give it some thought and like, shit, this is a good idea. So I don't know how. I haven't played with other AD carry. Like, the only other AD carry I played with that I can remember when in the time when it was remotely even relevant, and I don't even think it was with the Cop, and I don't remember shit.
Don't worry, Cop isn't relevant at all. Not even to this day now.
This is anyway, like 2.5 years ago. Yeah, but I don't know how other AD carries operate making decisions. But if he makes a decision, it's something that can be taken into account and worked upon.
Okay, but this is blowing Monty's mind here, because he's hearing about an AD carry who's getting like shot calls that are interesting and maybe they're applicable and they're intelligent and they actually fit the game, and you listen to him. Like, Monty can't even process what this means right now, right? It's like a brave new world we live in here, Monty.
Yeah, an AD carry making shot calls. Yeah, I don't know about that. They're just the pilots, man. They're like the ace fighter pilots. You don't trust them to design a mission plan. You trust them to have the fast reflexes and shoot the missiles. You know.
Yeah, you also don't tap them on the shoulder.
I mean, obviously, you don't have them as like shit. Make a decision for us, like right. It's like okay, if something comes out, it's like yeah, sure, we could follow it. That's about it.
No, I have a question too, because what's very interesting to me about Dignitas is we've seen teams like TSM and Curse have these players that have retired and gone ostensibly into coaching, even though they don't actually do much, if any, actual coaching. But Scara actually seems to do coaching.
Yeah. Have you actually seen the Odd One streaming schedule?
Oh, it's constantly?
It's 9 hours every day.
Does he still take breaks to eat like warmed up rice from the microwave?
No, I'm
or
just
something?
saying, I don't know what he does, but if you look at a streaming schedule like that, you can't possibly be doing coaching full time for an LCS team, if any coaching at all, unless you're not even fucking human. You have to be a robot to be able to stay awake.
I think Reggie's already said that he and Odd One are not doing much coaching. That's why they brought Loco Doco.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you know, he's removed from the team. So I think that the guys has been pulled. You know, the veil has been pulled away from that one. But in terms of you guys, so what is it about Scara that like lets him, as opposed to all these other pros, what is it about Scara that, you know, allows him to actually functionally coach you guys, especially as a former teammate? Isn't that an awkward relationship?
I mean, I don't think that I can't speak for any other coaches as to what they do, but I know that he wants it. He wants to see success happen. At least that's what I can take from it. And even though he's a former teammate, and it could be a little bit awkward, the fact that even when he was a teammate, the fact that he was a player as well made it so that his decision, if what he thought would happen, if he didn't follow it, respecting any call that or decision that he thought should have happened would be a lot tougher, just because we wouldn't be able to see him actually do it. But removed from the player position, if he makes the decision, you don't actually see that disconnection between an idea and not actually sticking to it. So you
or
can
being able to execute it properly.
Exactly, or being able to execute it. So you can actually follow it much more easily. So we understand that his idea is correct and we can execute it.
Sounds like my life, you know? Mechanically horrible. Doesn't play the game.
Yeah, I mean, if you're part of CLG as a team, and you're like, no shit, you like ignore what I'm doing. You should have done this. Like they're not gonna. Like, how can you coach from that position?
Well, I mean, I think my position of coaching is quite comfortable, and
yeah, no, I mean, I'm simply presenting a scenario.
Yeah, but anyway, but is it Scar's character that allowed him, because he seems much more motivated to really take the bull by the horns and help direct the team, and actually like seems to have a very good work ethic, you know? Is that just something that his personality allowed him to do, or is it something that the organization and you guys as a team encouraged him to do, or you asked him for that, you want it? Because it seems like these other teams that have retired pros, they just sit on their asses and stream, you know?
I mean, that's not a question for me to answer. I really don't know. If anything, you can just talk to him and be like, hey, Scar, you want to be on Summoning Insight on next week? Like,
well, no, I'm just asking from your perspective, did you want this? Is it something that you requested?
I mean,
or
no.
That just happened to you? You were just an innocent bystander?
It just so happened, and I was like, oh, shit. I mean, he can be a good coach. Like, we understand that his knowledge is good. Like, if we want to make a step forward, we're going to need more infrastructure in this, so.
Cool. I just think it's nice that Scarro is one of the few pro players that actually seems dedicated to moving into coaching in a long-term environment instead of, you know, being a stream hero.
I think so.
You mean, Monty, like in theory, that's happened a lot. But what happens now is becoming a coach is like the polite way of saying that someone's removed from the team. It's like, we've moved him to a coaching position. It's like, I mean, when you say that, like, what the Odd One at no point in time was ever coaching anyway. He's just coaching his bankroll to be swole as fuck. That's all he's coaching right there. Like that's like that guy out of like fucking Office Space. Like, yeah, I'm gonna need you to just take this trash, coach this trash out the back into the canister, please. Coach, can I have some water, please? Can you coach some water over to my desk, bust it over? Like, these people aren't really coaching, you know. Like,
no.
At no point in time was Reggie really coaching. Even if he actually gave them tips like, oh, practice more, or like, I think you did this wrong. He was never breaking the game down like an analyst. Like, I think that actually NA sort of gave the fans short change on that a bit, because it made some of them think that the scene had real coaches earlier than it actually did. Whereas realistically, this is the first split where most teams have had a coach. Even if they had an analyst, they never had an actual coach. So how much of Skara's stuff is actual coaching, Crumbs? Like, if we separate analysis from like looking at the game and making suggestions on picks and stuff, does he ever do any positional coaching? Does he give the overall strategy which you then implement? Like, how much of it is Skara telling you stuff, and how much input do you guys get in the strategy?
What would you consider actual coaching? Because I know what you consider analysis.
So we would differentiate the analyst role. Analyst is somebody who's there to collect stats and kind of manage statistics and keep track of other teams and present that information to the team, but not actually give direction to what the team should be doing, the picks that should be made, the strategy that should be implemented, as well as serving as more of an emotional core of the team as well and managing player relationships.
I'd say he's definitely a coach.
There you go. Okay, cool.
Was there I did an interview with Odie, which hasn't come out yet.
You did?
He actually,
You personally,
when I say an interview, I mean I actually had him on camera and I talked. It wasn't just like a one-sided interview of him telling me things through Twitch chat. love you, Odie. But anyway, he actually told me that when he talked to Skara and said like, okay, Skara, we need to remove you from the team, but I want you to stay in a coaching role. And I actually want you to be a real coach, okay, not like a fake one like those ones. He told me Skara initially told him like, I don't think I can coach. Like, I don't know if I can do that. But then he tried it, and like even 2 days later or something, it was working okay. He was coaching. It was all going fine. When you played with Skara, did you think he could be a coach? Like, did he have the right sort of mind? Could you understand why he would think that he can't do it?
I mean, I never gave any thought as to him being a coach at the time. That's not something that you think about. It's like, shit, you'd be a really good coach. But I knew that some of the information that he had was definitely very valuable, just because you watched him stream, and even he seems to be very knowledgeable about the game, but just it's really difficult to understand it just because you don't see the connection between what he's saying with the actual play, especially playing with him at the time. But once he turned to coaching, it was like a completely new thing, and I thought that was really neat.
In the current meta, all the junglers complain, and all the teams complain, there's only 4 viable junglers.
Sucks.
Dude, there's only 4 that you can do, and then this lane swaps fucking suck. I have to go in the lane. Like, what do you don't like the current meta for junglers? You need more champion pool diversity.
You play like 3 to 4 champions.
Okay.
And then you're just a walking ward pretty much.
So it's basically how supports used to feel. Do you have sympathy for like season 3 support players now?
I think he's died.
Rip.
Yeah, he seems to have died. I'll do a commercial while we're waiting for him to come back.
Yeah, I disconnected. I wasn't able to hear anything.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I was asking, you say you're a walking ward. Do you have a sympathy for season 3 support players now?
I mean, not barely. I mean, at the time, jungler, you're just like first item oracles too. So,
but there's basically always been an issue with your jungle. So you just hate the jungle in every season.
No, I love the jungle, but the thing is, before you had the opportunities, like, oh look, you can do jungle Kha'Zix, right? You're tanky, you do all this damage, you're so, and then now it's like, practically, it's like, you should consider first item Sightstone. You're going to need to have a ward on every back. You can't forget about going for late game damage items. Just focus on protecting your teammates. Get the vision so that they can do the stuff, right?
See, this is one of those moments, Crumbs, where I realize a philosophical chasm exists on either side of me here. Because as Crumbs is describing that scenario, like, listen, you got to get vision control, you got to get ahead early, you got to get the team. Monty's thinking like, awesome, that sounds fuck. I should play jungle. This sounds amazing. That sounds like the most fun role in the whole game. Imagine that. You could control the whole game. You could be a mastermind inside the game. Meanwhile, you're thinking like, come on, man, I can't do no damage on this shit. I want to be getting those 3 kills. I want to be up there. I want to listen. Hobie wants KDA too. Come on, show me some scratch. Like,
I wouldn't put it as to actually the position itself. I'd simply put it more as to the champion variety. I think the champion variety just dulls it down by quite a bit.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible right
now. It's not about the position. I absolutely love. Yeah, I love the fact that you have so much control. Even though you take a support role, you're kind of like the strongest person on the team for like the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then you start slowly switching over to a support role. The problem is that if you look at match histories, everyone's playing the same like 3 to 4 champions every fucking game. Like, there is literally no variety, and people have even stopped banning. It's like, you know what? Yeah, you're just gonna play this. I'll play the other one. Don't worry about it. Just play the same champions every time. Like, I just want to have some sort of variety to what I can play, to even change just remotely change how a team would function. Because since jungle is so important, the pick itself dictates a lot as to how the game is going to flow.
Do you think that's affected Meteos, this split?
I mean, I thought he was performing well on champions like Lee Sin and Elise, so I don't think so. I mean, he was doing fine on Zac and Nasus. I think that just shows his effectiveness as a jungler in itself. I don't think it has to do with the picks that he's maybe not comfortable with. Sure, he has some struggling games on Rengar, but I think he's still a fine player.
Okay, he's good, but, you know, last 2 splits, dude, he might have been the MVP of the whole league. He was, like, maybe the best jungler by far, I'm pretty sure most people would say. Is there a reason why he doesn't stand out as much now?
It's not a one-man team anymore. You cannot carry. It's practically impossible to carry as an individual versus people that are coordinated. So it's just the game's changed.
People usually criticize No Name, the jungler of LMQ.
Yeah.
What is your take on playing him? Because actually you've done well against him. So what do you think of him?
I haven't actually gotten to play that much against him, really. We barely have scrimmed LMQ, and we've only played 3 games against him, with which all 3 games is either they had stomped us or the other 2 that we stomped them. So just getting a good feeling as how the opponent, how a team plays after that is pretty tough, just because you haven't scrimmed against him that much. But I mean, he seems like a standard jungler. There's nothing too outstanding. Like, I don't think he's the guy that's gonna go for like a crazy player, or he's gonna be at the least expected place at the random time. So I think he's just a solid standard player.
I actually have a quick question that I'm going to put in. Like, usually, because people had asked me this already, and I actually thought about it, which was, there was this recent news that Super Hot Crew have added in a coaching position, this guy XJ9.
Oh, yes. I thought he committed suicide.
That's the point. Okay, we're not going to go into
maybe publicity suicide.
We're not going to go into any of the personal life stuff, because I think that's irrelevant to the show and the game anyway. Okay, and in fact, in general, I don't think that you should judge people who you don't know much about on the basis of their lives, on hearsay and things that you've heard secondhand. Okay, I just want to ask Crumbs, like, is the rep that he has, aside from the bad stuff, just as a player? I heard someone say that, like, he actually was like a top jungle talent at some point on solo queue, or he was very good on certain champions. Like, you must have played him at some point in past seasons. Was he a good player in and of himself as a jungler?
Yeah, I got the chance to play quite a bit against him, but this was at the time that, I don't remember the exact date on it. I'd say it was around the time that C9 made it into the LCS, whatever the split that was.
That was
I think
summer
it was about
last
a year
year.
ago. Yeah, last year, so 1 year ago. And he was doing very well in solo queue in the meta that you literally were able to just solo farm and the jungler and carry practically 1v5. I don't think that's something that translates into you're a good strategic person. I think that just happens to be, yeah, you can farm and you have the mechanical ability to carry from a farm position. I think that's simply it. But as to how he thought as a person, how he viewed the game as a jungler, that's something that I have no idea on. So if he's benefiting Super Hot Crew, it's in terms that I don't know.
Okay. As a general principle, this idea of having positional coaches, guys where, I mean, in these examples, it's usually someone who, for some reason, can't play, and so as a result, he's in a weird scenario where he could potentially be very good at his position, but he can't play in LCS. Therefore, it makes sense as to how he could be a coach, because otherwise, if they were that good, they'd just be in LCS. Okay, in this sort of a scenario, do you think that's the future of League of Legends? If League of Legends exists in 10 years, Crumbs, will every team have like a jungle coach, a top coach, a mid coach, like a specialist guy who maybe doesn't know the team game, but individually he can give good info to that one guy?
I mean, if you have the money and you have the infrastructure for it, I'm sure that'd be a good idea. You could have like one guy that's like a retired god of a certain role, just sitting behind the other guy. Look, you should be trying this. Try this. No, think about this in this situation. Consider this. Do this. Do that. If you have the resources for it, I don't think that'd be a negative thing for a team to have.
Even
So
or the other thing you could do too is even just have a player who like when the team is scrimming, like only plays solo queue and just is a specialist in lane matchups and is much more focused on the laning phase of the game, and testing out different lane matchups and kind of doing that trial and error for the pro player in advance. That would be also
exactly.
very
I think the
effective.
game has so much depth that you can have an endless amount of just resources, of human resources, to actually benefit the 5 people that are actually playing. I mean, imagine like later down the line, you're gonna have some Korean team having like, how much money would you give Faker to coach your mid laner? To just sit behind him and tell him what he's doing right or what he's doing wrong? Like that sounds like an asset to me.
The only problem with that is,
And also, this is already kind of happening because the Korean scene has had a lot more retired pros go into coaching. Like on Najin, there's Vinyl Cat and Makuza, who are former professional support and jungle players who do have a lot of experience in these roles already. So.
The only problem with that scenario, though, is you picked the best example because you picked the best player in the world, Faker. But I get the sense that, like, in some sense, he might be the worst coach. Because either he would just tell you, like, well, I would just have gone there and then mechanically outplayed him, used the maximum of my skills. That one would be off cooldown. Then I'd move over and I'd kill them all and I'd get a 1v2. And then the mid laner guy would be like, what the fuck? How am I supposed to do that? Like, or it could go the other way, though. Maybe Faker is so godlike that he's literally, it's almost like a Gnostic Christian thing. You don't even need to speak to him. If you just had contact, if you could just even reach out and touch Faker, you would draw some of his power into you. You'd be like, oh, I feel like I can play the game better now. I feel like I can dominate the game. Maybe that's all that SKT does every game. They all gather around in a huddle before, and you think you're just cheering, morale. No, they're all absorbing power from Faker. He kills people on solo queue, absorbs their souls. He's like Thresh, and then they all transmit some of it from him. And that's why SKT's been doing badly recently. Because when the other players got worse, Faker was like, this is more of a drain on me. More power goes out of me every game. And they were like, please, Lord Faker, we must have the life force. Like, anyway, that's obviously a side topic there. That was I'm thinking up a question while I'm saying all that. Okay. So you want me to ask you more about Dignitas. So I've got a question for you. When Monty was bringing up before that he thinks a weakness, and when we say weakness, we mean relative to the rest of the team. So if the team has incredibly strong solo laners, then the bot lane can be weaker without being weak compared to every bot lane. So a weaker bot lane out of all the roles in the team. I've heard a lot of people give props to Kiwi Kid this split. People say I'm a Cutie Pie's pretty good as an AD carry. Does Monty see the bot lane differently than Crumbs does in Dignitas?
I mean, I think it just has to do with the same problem with North America. It's just inconsistency. I think, and out of the whole team, I think our solo lanes happen to be the most consistent out of everyone else. Myself and our bottom lane, I think, are the least consistent part of our team, and that just happens to show in the results.
Yep, sounds reasonable, but I do think that Kiwi Kid is punished by having a pretty small champion pool, and that's a problem right now for Dig.
If Braum got banned tomorrow, Monty, and you could never play it again, would that affect Kiwi Pie?
Yeah, probably. I mean, they like to ban Braum against themselves, against us. So, I mean, I think that affected that game. Why'd you guys do that? Why'd you ban Braum when you had first pick on blue side?
Oh, we wouldn't want. Why would we wouldn't want to first pick Braum? We want TF.
Okay. You first picked Braum in the past. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah, well, that's really it.
All right.
Thanks,
by the way.
Never been. Okay.
I mean, I feel like that's pretty straightforward.
So, Crumbs, as a jungler, you've never been to Worlds. You went when you were a top laner, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you've never got to play, in theory, these amazing foreign junglers. I mean, you got to play Diamond Prox at the MLG Invitational one?
No. I actually got to play, like, right when I was getting back into jungling, when I was in Curse. I got to play Gambit Gaming.
Okay.
So what you
Katowice?
could say would be, no, I am Hanover, where they completely crushed Dignitas when I was in Curse. Now, I saw that like as a golden opportunity, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know who the hell Gambit was. They come into the tournament like, shit, look, these guys look scary as hell. You should have seen the poster they had for M5 back then. Like, that's when they didn't use makeup. They didn't even do shit. Like, look, just sit here. We'll take a picture of you.
Okay.
They looked pretty scary back then. But we got to play them, and that was when they're really good back then. And I got to play against Diamond at the time, and when he was playing Lee Sin. So I took that as a really good opportunity to just kind of judge myself towards the international, at least the European scene, or Gambit in particular. And I thought that was a really good game because I was scared at the time, like, shit, he's playing Lee Sin, he's going to invade the shit out of me. So I just warded a bunch and were able to actually outplay. And we barely beat them, but we lost because our Morgana flash Zhonya's without ulting into all 5 of them. But I thought game.
And I'm assuming Morgana was mid in this game. It was
mid lane Morgana
Skara.
back when she was in mid lane.
Okay.
No, it was Nijaki.
Yeah, Nijaki.
Nijaki, yeah,
famous
Curse,
mid lane
That was
Morgana.
Curse. Morgana, Ryzen, Veigar all day.
So
Hey, Veigar is good. I like Veigar.
over the last few years, though, you haven't had the same opportunity that people like Cloud9, have, etc., to go to these international tournaments. Is there a there a jungler out there that you like this guy's style and you'd like to go up against him and see what it'd be like? Is there one that comes to your mind?
Ideally, at the time, I'm trying to keep an eye on most of the international scene, and the only person that I could say that I'd really want to be able to play against, now I don't know how that'd be possible, would just be to play against the style that Bengi had in last season Worlds, where he'd just go practically full utility on even carry champions and just ward a bunch and be able to make plays off like incredibly low amounts of CS and just be able to be at the right place at the right time, being significantly weaker in terms of combat stats than the opponent. I feel like playing against a player that would be able to pull something like that consistently would be quite a learning experience.
I mean, it also helps having like the greatest player to ever touch the game in the mid lane when you're doing that, right?
I mean, yeah, sure, but I still think that it's pretty nice being able to pull something like that off.
No, but I mean, when I'm thinking of the same context of the timeline of when this was, and you're thinking to yourself like, it's weird that doesn't work when I'm going mid and then Skara's there. Like somehow we don't get those. Like I don't understand. Like, I need more damage. Like what?
I mean, you can't compare practically anyone. Fake is fucking beast.
Sure, yeah. I mean, you can compare some people. You could compare Dade to Faker. You could compare Froggen to Faker. It's true. It would be a waste of the oxygen that I'm bringing out now to compare Skara from last split to Faker. I agree. Like, let's not even have that discussion.
Well, but the
just,
fans love to compare Bjergsen to Faker. You know how that goes.
And it doesn't even matter. Like, compare whoever he's playing against in an actual game. If he's not even playing that, it's not even worth mentioning. Like people get so strung up about, oh shit, he's better, this team's better, this player is better. Like, man, like people just stop giving a shit.
So I feel like that's the Dignitas motto.
So everyone who's a pro though doesn't.
Everybody you're like the new Bay Life team, the new relaxed team. We're just gonna focus on ourselves. Fuck everybody else's opinions. I actually disagree. It's like welcome to sports, man. Welcome to sports where teams like to talk, like people like to talk.
No. I mean, I think that's fine,
teams.
but I think making comparisons is fine. But when you're making comparisons that across nations that people don't even play each other, it's like practically ridiculous. Like the World Cup soccer, you can make comparisons about that because you've seen these players compete against each other. You've seen them perform like in their leagues between each other against themselves, so you have a much better understanding. When you're comparing teams that are playing different games just because their champions are different, their meta is different, and they're not even playing against each other for a year, making a comparison seems so. As
a professional analyst, it actually is my job to be able to rate teams and like make comparisons to teams and theorize about what might happen.
Yeah,
that's my job, man.
It's all theory. It's like
it is.
That's it.
Of course it is. But coming into Worlds, that's what my fans expect of me, is to make predictions and to say I think that the matchup's going to go this way.
Of course, but then let's say CLG goes to Worlds, right? Your prediction about what would happen at Worlds would be exponentially better than anybody else, for instance, that I could say. Just because you'd have CLG boot camping in Korea, you'd be able to say, look, we've seen how they've performed against these top teams. We know how they're doing. And so your knowledge would be technically insider knowledge as to what would happen. Like, I don't know how these teams perform against each other. Like, your job as an analyst is to oversee practically most of the regions, or I don't know if all the regions, and just make strong statements about him. Like, that's not what I do. Like,
here's something interesting to me then, because now that we're thinking about, okay, let's apply that to Dignitas. How would Dignitas do at Worlds? How would they do all the things? Luckily, I've got an insider. I've got the inside info. So let's get some of this inside info. If Dignitas went to Worlds, Are you really one of these people, Crumbs? You know, like there's a certain sort of American or North American person who thinks that they actually, their philosophy in life is that you have to believe you're going to win. Like you have to be 100% certain you're going to win and you're going to beat this team, and it doesn't matter who they are, you're always going to beat them, and that's what's going to carry you home. Are you one of those guys where you have to believe, like if Dignitas goes to Worlds, you're just going to win Worlds, right?
I mean, you don't have to believe it. It's not about believing that you're going to win, like just being like, shit, doesn't matter what we're against, we're going to do it. It's about just not being afraid to lose. Like, that's pretty much it. Just play how you'd play. Just don't play into it thinking, oh, shit, we're going to lose, we're going to get crushed. Like, oh, we got to play safer, I guess we're going to get crushed. You just have to, I mean, just go with what you've practiced and go with that. I mean, believing is not going to take you the entire time.
Right. And I think, too, the thing that we have to remember about the NA team at Worlds is that, okay, so we know there's going to be 16 teams. We know they're going to be divided into groups of 4. We know that there are going to be 3 Korean teams, 3 North American teams, 3 European teams, 3 Chinese teams, right? So the thing about it is with 4 groups of 4, based on seeding, assuming that the first place Chinese team goes into its own group, the first place Korean team goes into its own group, the first place European team and North American team are each in different groups, right? Because there are only 3 Korean teams, more than likely, because of the way that Riot will set up the brackets, either the number 1 North American or the number 1 European team in groups will be without a Korean team in that group. Now, if that happens to be the North American team, I think that gives North America a legitimate shot at making the quarterfinals, right? Pretty reasonable that an NA team would make the round of 8. In which case, and then potentially, based on how brackets shake out, there's a possibility that the number 1 team in NA, if they don't have a Korean team in their group and they don't hit a Korean team in the quarterfinal, could in fact make semis. I think that is the most optimistic situation for any North American team heading into Worlds, is that a semifinal finish would be about all we could hope for.
Yeah, but doesn't that semi-final finish involve having to play like a European team?
Quite possibly. Or a Chinese team.
Well, why would anyone predict them to beat a Chinese team with apropos of nothing?
No, I know. Well, I think a European team, if they could face a European team, then maybe you could make semis. Regardless, I think a Western team has a strong chance.
Regardless of that, whoever Western team would end in the semis facing the North American team that managed to make it through the first round without a Korean team, whichever team is facing them would have to probably have beaten some sort of Asian team. So it still would not be just like a crazy, completely lucked out matchup.
Yeah. I'm just saying that I'm just trying to paint the most optimistic picture that I can see.
That'd be beautiful. Like if you just got to have like practically just a ticket straight into semis like it was last.
Yeah, that's why I think. But for this reason, that's why I think that being number 1 in North America at the end of this split is incredibly important to a team's success at Worlds, because you're most likely to not face stronger teams in the group stage. Like being 3rd place in NA, you might be in a group with like the 1st place Korean team, and then you're just going to get destroyed. So.
Yeah, but you also, Monty, if there was some jiggery pokery to happen, the 3rd place NA team might be in a group with the 1st place from Europe, you know. Who knows how these things happen, Monty? This magic happens behind the scenes. These random number generators have a weird habit of spitting out things that look awfully convenient for the powers that be.
Yeah.
Conspiracy. You know. Who was the second shooter, Monty? Who was that man on the grassy knoll? Which Riot member was that? Did he detag before he shot the bullet? That's what I want to know. Anyway, so Crumbs, when you describe there, you think of it like, okay, quite a down-to-earth, game-to-game approach. Like, okay, we're going to play the way we play in this time. We know what our strategy is. No matter who we're facing, we have to do that anyway, even if we are facing SK Telecom or we're placing OMG or whoever. What do you think is a realistic, from an outsider's perspective, what's a realistic finish for Dignitas if they go to the World Championship?
I mean, currently, if we go to Worlds, like let's say Worlds is tomorrow, we wouldn't go very far because we still have quite a lot to work on. But if optimistically we'd finish the split in a reasonable, let's just say top 3, doesn't even matter, first to third, irrelevant, we'd make it there. And by then, if you boot camp successfully, I could see that luckily semifinalists finish quite well. If we actually are able to make the best out of the time that we have to practice effectively, I could see that.
I think semifinals for a Western team is I would say that's like just because of how the brackets shake out. I'd say maybe there's a 50% shot of a Western team, either North America or Europe, making the semis. Just because
50%?
Yeah.
That's pretty high, Monty.
Yeah, maybe it is too high. Maybe 30%. Maybe it is too high. Maybe
okay,
right.
So for a second, let's pretend Crumbs isn't on this show. I have an ability to read Monte Cristo and think of what I think. What would Monty do? You know, it's like what he's trying to be. If I could transfer my mentality to Doublelift, they'd be the best team in the whole league. But unfortunately, we can't do that. Okay, so I think what would Monty do, and then I hypothesize what he would do. I think Monte Cristo doesn't think under any circumstance that Dignitas is going to the semi-finals of World Championships. I think Monte Cristo bets his house that they're not right now.
Well, I wouldn't bet anything right now. Are you serious?
Yeah. I
like,
think that
it's completely, like, as I meant, it's practically purely fictional until we actually can go and say, look, we fixed the mistake that we were making. We're able to perform consistently with actual deliverance in our play, then perhaps.
Right now,
hell no.
Under current conditions, without boot camping or fixing these problems, I would say that I don't anticipate any North American teams to reach the semifinals. But I do think that under a proper boot camp condition, that it is a possibility with the right group, with the right bracket. But it is a small possibility, even so.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shot that you got to make. That's it. You have to go for that practice to be able to even have a shot at it.
And I also think that if the Western teams are going to compete well at Worlds, it is 100% necessary that a boot camp in Korea happens together, and that we all try to get better together at the same time, and that it really has to be a multi-team effort from North America and Europe to really hit it hard, because otherwise if the NA and European teams don't work together, like, I don't see anybody getting very far.
Do you think so, Crumbs? Do you think NA and Europe will team up? And like at the end of Top Gun, Iceman will team up with Maverick. Iceman is Europe, and then they look at NA Maverick, and they're like, "You're out of control, Maverick." It's like, maybe I just take the chances. You don't, motherfucker. And then they're like, but at the end, they have to team up to fight the Russians. So in this scenario, are the Koreans. They're the MiGs, you know.
It's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? That's okay. That's about it. You have to do if they're the strongest region and you haven't figured out how to take them down by yourself, you got to implement the help of someone else.
So let me set this topic up like this, Crumbs. Season 1, NA were the gods. TSM, CLG, these are the teams that were going to win.
You can't even say that. NA was the only region.
Yeah, by default, I mean, obviously. I was being sarcastic there, mate. They were the gods in the sense that they were the only god that existed. Okay. So they go to the Season 1 championship. You know, they're thinking they're going to win. CLG's going to win. Epic Gamer's going to win. TSM's going to win. No one wins. 2 European teams make the final, and, you know, that's the end of that story. Europe has 2 top teams, and then NA's below. Season 2 World Championships. Okay. Dignitas, TSM's been winning everything in NA. People are like, maybe they're really strong. CLG have this belief that, like, oh, we went to Korea, so we could do really well. Tournament ends. Only one NA team makes top 8, and there's 2 European teams ahead of them again. They're in the semi-finals. Season 3 World Championship. Cloud9 are amazing. They're dominating. TSM's done pretty well towards the end of the split. We've got Vulcan. Maybe they can do something. Some people are saying NA could be better. The tournament happens. One team from NA makes the round of 8. They go out. A European team finishes ahead. They finish in the semi-finals. Season 4. Here's your chance, Crumbs. This is the one time you can get in there. You can tell me how it's going to go. How will Europe do compared to NA? I think the odds. This is the best chance for you this time, right?
Man, you built that up so much, and that's the last thing I expected you to ask. I mean, I could see Europe.
Is this the time that NA has the 2 teams that are better than the European finish?
That's not even what I was even thinking about. I mean, I could see it for sure.
What are you thinking about?
That's not even what you should be.
You were thinking about that food draw right now and what you're going to do after this show. How are you going to relax?
And your only goal is just to beat Europe. Like you practically failed already.
Mate, at the moment, your goal should be like even finishing top 3. So I'm hypothesizing beyond that. Like, okay. How do you imagine NA will do versus Europe? Listen, Soaz told me he's going to take a shit on your face and then wipe his fucking ass across your mustache and clean it off. Like, do you even have any comeback to that?
I mean, if he wants to be irrational about it, no.
No, please be entirely rational and break him down using. Listen, this is how you beat people who are very provocative with their statements and they shout. You defeat them by being very rational, by speaking quietly, using long words, concepts, sentences. They have nothing to do with it. They can't come. They need you to fight against them, right? So just break it down for me,
exactly.
Just chill out, just sit back. Sit back with a 40, relax, just break it down for me, spit some game, tell me what's going on here. We're just chilling with Crumbs right now. Come on, Crumbs. What do you think of Europe, man?
Oh man, no, I know what you want me to say, but
no, I don't want you to say anything. I just want you. I just want you to come to Jesus and open your heart and tell the truth. Confess, my son.
I'm not a religious man, but I could see Europe performing decently at Worlds, but I think that NA would overall perform either at the same I think that NA and Europe just happen to be pretty similar in terms of the top teams right now. Pretty much the entire Western region just fucking we're not able to be consistent in any way, shape, or form until the first team to fix the consistency issue after boot camp, if it happens, which I hope it would, is going to be the one that wins. After that boot camp, the first team that says, yeah, our scrim record, we're able to play it very well. The first team that comes out and says that the teams that can do that will beat all the other Western teams by far. It's not even going to be close.
Okay.
Well, I would say Fnatic actually did fix that issue for Worlds at the very least last year. They did perform very consistently at the World Championship after losing that first game, but they made a good run of it.
Yeah, Fnatic definitely has a good record of knowing how to boot camp effectively. So if anything, that's the only team we've known so far from the European region that we could assume would be going to Worlds from the top teams right now. So if anything, I'd say Fnatic would be the one with the highest chances right now, just because you haven't seen Alliance perform in that international stage ever. So, well, not ever, but not in anything practically significant.
I mean, I think it's interesting too, because out of the teams from NA, it's, for me at least, it's difficult to see LMQ or TSM being very successful at Worlds. Just because I think that LMQ and TSM are both so reliant on the kind of their early laning phase or their strong mechanics that they just wouldn't be able to keep it together against mechanically equal players who have better team coordination.
I think late game decision making is really important as well.
Yeah. And I think that's really troublesome for those two teams.
I agree.
So in this scenario, in general, would you categorize it for Western teams, their best chance is early game success, right? They don't want to go late game with Asian teams.
I mean, I feel like Worlds is so far away that it has a good potential to just be able to catch somebody off guard. It's depending on what crazy thing gets thrown at you in terms of patches. I'm sure it's going to happen that they're going to release a crazy new patch and then it's going to be oh shit, we can play this kind of stuff and catch the opponent off guard, which happened last Worlds with the addition of Aatrox, right? Korean teams weren't able to actually deal with this, so they just started banning it. If more of that happens, you're going to be able to actually create an early lead, if that's what your team needs, to be able to beat these teams that are superior or equal to you in skill, in just mechanical skill, but they're better in decision making. And
we've talked about it last year too, or we talked about this about last year too, is that the patch was extremely good for Fnatic, and everybody knew that going into Worlds too. Everybody was like, wow, Fnatic got a lucky break on the Assassin patch and they should do okay. And SK Telecom was also helped by that, because when Faker can play Assassins, he'll just style on you. If Faker can't play Assassins or they're not the best picks anymore, then you limit some of Faker's ability to outplay you.
Last few splits when you used to play against Cloud9 and they were at their peak, and every split they had 89% win rate, 90% win rate, and they would lose very infrequently. Were they actually unbeatable at the time? Did they have that sense about them when you played them?
No, I don't think so. I actually thought that we actually enjoyed playing against them, even though we ended up losing. I'm pretty sure almost all of them, or maybe with the exception of one or two games.
I think you won one game.
Maybe one. Yeah. It practically doesn't matter, but we were comfortable playing against them because we never felt like we'd get stomped by them, because we were able to we had a really strong early game, and I think in interviews they'd say that they'd be afraid of our early game, but our decision making and understanding of the game, while maintaining some sort of objective control was completely invisible. So they're simply able to, even if we got an early game lead, they'd be able to eventually beat us with objectives, beat us with better team fighting, and practically just playing the game at a better level. So it was a fine matchup for us, but they just understood the game better and were able to beat us. But they didn't seem unbeatable at all.
When Cloud9 was on top, as is often the case, if a team's dominating the region, people will want to suggest nearly all their players at their position might be the best. Maybe that's why they're shining at the moment. Maybe the jungle's the best, the mid's the best, all this. As it stands right now, with where C9 is today, are there any C9 players who, for Crumbs, are top 2 at their position in NA? Who stands out in that sense?
I mean, when I look at a player that I want to see is very good, I'm looking mostly for consistency. Yeah. Now, that may have to do with the fact that I myself am looking to get consistency in my own play. So I see Meteor as extremely consistent. I think that maybe this whole split, he's had a couple games, like some Rengar games, maybe he's not comfortable in the champion, but I see him as a very consistent player, and that for me makes a very solid player.
Is there anyone else on the team who's at that level?
In C9, I feel like the bot lane seems consistent, and there just doesn't seem to be like just crazily outshining everybody else. Like, I don't think they just really outshine people, but I think their whole team seems to just play solid. And then Heist has been having a rough patch, especially with the changes to the meta.
When it was earlier in the split, people speculated, oh, maybe it's because of his health problems he had before All-Stars, and then maybe coming back was hard to get back in the game and practice and all that. At this point, can we now look past that? Is it now like an actual problem in-game and in terms of performance? Do you think he still has any after effects of the health thing?
I don't think there's any after effects of the health thing. Thinking about it, I think it's just too much at this point. I think it really just comes down to the difference in playstyle that you have now as to what you had way before. I mean, before you could just play Zed, split push for days, play some sort of assassin. You can split push, you can get an early lead and just completely snowball that, just completely out of control by the sheer power of the champion, or same with other assassins. And now, because of that, the changes now, you're pretty much forced to play passive mid lane, not necessarily passively, but you're more of a wave clear utility heavy team fighting champion. That's not the style that C9 was used to. Like, they're no longer able to just pick, oh, let's just take this assassin mid lane, then put ourselves split pushing bottom or split pushing in any lane and completely win off that.
Right. And I think that these advantages are very helpful to CLG because Link has long been, more of a utility mid laner, and so I think we have benefited very greatly from these changes.
Yep, that's true.
If C9, for some reason, didn't get one of the 3 spots for Worlds, do you think that they're a team that'll just ride it out and they'll never change that roster and they'll all just want to keep that 5? Do you think could you imagine a world in which Cloud9 changes a player?
No, I can't. I think they'd stick it out. I think they'd simply address their issues way more aggressively. And if somebody in their team, whoever they think should be stepping up, or if they're not doing them themselves, will simply be targeted more aggressively. But I definitely see them as a team sticking together as 5 because I don't see a reason why not. I really don't.
Monty, Summer Split 2015. C9 has the same roster as right now, true or false?
Maybe not Summer Split, but I think definitely Spring Split. They're going to give it some more time. I mean, they obviously had something very magical and very, they had a lot of synergy with their roster, so I think that they should give it more time before they make any roster changes. That's what I would do, at least.
Okay. Do you watch much Korean League of Legends, Crumbs?
I do.
Did you watch the recent OGN matches at the end of the group stage?
That was
Frost versus SKTS and Blaze versus Stealths.
Those are the ones that I have not watched. I've watched other ones up until then.
In general, what have your thoughts been of the Korean scene at the moment? Are there any, who are the ones who stand out, or who just is interesting?
I think it's really interesting seeing Spirit jungle Kha'Zix. That's one of the things that just stands out to me the most. Because I see the champion, I'm just trying to piece it together. Like, how is this champion working? And I play it myself. I'm like, maybe you went, like, what is he doing? And then it just seems very strange to me. And just the general idea that they have in the game seems to be slightly ahead, because at the time when I think it was Samsung, the team that has Looper, I forget the name of that
Blue?
one.
No, it's White actually. The Ozone
White.
one, yeah. White?
Yeah, so they were running at the time, and they was practically obsessed with Kale top, right? It was all about Kale, free win Kale, all that stuff, and then they were actually one of the few teams that was able to leave it open and then play against it because they had thought of a good strategy to play against a good champion. So they were running Mundo against it, and were able to actually perform effectively against it. And I thought that was really interesting at the time.
Sorry, guys, I'm going to charge my camera for 1 second. I got to deal with something.
Okay. Right. Clearly, Seraph has been killed, and when we come back after this break, we'll be speaking to a correspondent from the CLG house with this dark time in our history. No, anyway, we'll just keep talking. So, okay, Spirit is actually someone where he's been in that same team for over a year. He's been in for a whole bunch of splits back when they were MVP Blue, but he wasn't anything special back then. No one would have mentioned him as a top 3 jungler or someone amazing. Is there something about this meta you think that's making him come forwards? Is he individually really good? What is it that impresses you so much?
I mean, I don't think it's particularly just being crazily impressed by him. In fact, the Kha'Zix games that he's had have simply not been that outstanding, in my opinion. I think by the time that he made a rise in his game and was regarded as one of the best junglers in the league was a little bit of a while ago, not currently, because the games that I look at now, I see a lot of standout players that, like for instance, Kakao and Lee Sin. Like that guy plays that champion practically perfectly. He's so good at it. And then you see people, I think Impact had some really good starting minutes on jungle Rengar. So it seems like all these players that perhaps
Impact's the top laner.
Bengi. Yeah,
okay.
Bengi had some really good, like just really, really nice Rengar play. And then you see these players that were regarded as some of the best players in the world back then, and now they're still able to maintain some of that. But it seems that as the game progresses into like late game decisions, Spirit seems to be the one that just outshines them. Like these old school players, you can't even call them old school, just seem to have been falling off from the early game. They're kind of struggling into the mid to late game decision, just because I feel like the game in the early game, the jungler can make most of the decisions on it by himself. But once it turns into a team environment, I feel like Spirit just simply is able to make better decisions than all these other guys.
Why
do you think Spirit's the best jungler at the moment, Monty?
I think Spirit is amazing because he is just mechanically. It's amazing to me how good he got so quickly. Because mechanically, he's extremely sharp. He makes so many right decisions in terms of team fighting, and also just the jungle follow and knowing where to be in the lane swap. I mean, he's outstanding right now. And considering he was a sub not too long ago and how fast he got good, it's pretty incredible. Do I think he's absolutely, unquestionably the best? But he's probably top 3 right now.
I mean, who's comparable to him?
Kakao and Dandy.
But Bengi isn't up there with those 3?
No.
Okay. If someone has been around the scene a long time like Spirit had, Monty, and then suddenly he becomes really, really good, do you buy that in a year from now we'll still be talking about him as a top 3? Is it possible that there's some kind of game change or team change that makes him really good? Like, I mean, I asked the question of Crumbs before. Like, obviously it's harder for Crumbs to look good when he has Cruiser the Bruiser top lane as opposed to Zion Spartan top lane. Like, one of those is going to make his plays be emphasized more than the other. Do you think there's any role of that has been involved with why Spirit looks so good now? Discuss it with Crumbs.
I think Dade, helps Spirit look good, but it's just from observing Spirit's mechanics and observing the way that he ganks and the way that I think what's most impressive to me about Spirit is that he always seems to know the right skill to use in comparison to what of his opponent's skills are available or on cooldown, and he seems to predict the actions and team fights of other people extremely well. And I don't think that's something that's going to fade away, and I think that's one of his greatest strengths. He just has that. He's very smart and can see things coming before they happen.
Yeah, I think his mid game to late game, which happens to be mostly team decisions, are superior to practically all the other junglers right now.
Indeed. So I don't think he's going to fall off in that regard. And also in terms of him coming up, he got good quickly, but he was also, like I said, a sub, and so he hasn't had that long actually playing on the team. Right? It's
I
not
think
like he was
Thorin
playing.
left, by the way.
I'm back.
Goodbye, Thorin.
All right.
Yeah, you kept talking. Well done, Monty. I knew I could trust
Thanks.
you to keep
Sorry,
it going.
I had
on
to
that
deal.
one.
My landlord showed up, so I had to go deal with that real quick.
And he was like, Mr. Cristo, the woman come with the baby. Why you don't pay the money? You're like, I told her I had $100 and get out of here. I'm an American citizen, goddammit.
That's exactly what it was
okay,
like.
I thought so. So anyway, so going forwards, like when I ask you to describe it that way, it does seem like with junglers, that's one of the most variable positions I've seen in all of League of Legends. Like if you spanned out all the history of League of Legends, 4 to 5 months, who people would call the top 3 is super variable. Like Spirit comes in now, Bengi was in before. Then before that, you had once upon a time, Helios was a top jungler, right, Monty?
No, that's not even remotely
In
true.
like summer of 2012.
No. Well, okay, fine. If you go back to like the infancy of Korean League of Legends, fine.
Okay.
Hey, didn't
But-
they win as MLG Blaze? Was it MIG
yeah.
Blaze?
Yeah, they
MIG
won.
Blaze.
They won the first season of Champions.
So do you think as a role is the reason why there aren't more consistent standout players? There's Diamond Prox and then that's about it. There's Diamond Prox and then
Whoa, Dandy has been consistent for a really long time.
that's one other exception. Keep going. Who else, Monty? Who else?
Cacao has
Cacao,
been,
yeah,
has
Cacao.
been consistent.
Okay, so
for
he's
a
had
long
like
time.
1 year, yeah, 1 year.
Medias has been pretty consistent.
Yeah, Meteos has been.
Okay, we're up to 4 names now so far.
Okay, can you name? I mean, you can't. Can you name that many names from other roles as well?
Yeah, pick a role. Let's see.
Top lane.
Fuck off. Top lane's the one that you can't do because the whole meta just changed. So yeah, a real role, dude. Mid lane, okay. Froggen, Faker. Who else have we got?
Expeke.
Expeke, Alexich.
Those last two, like Expect has been inconsistent, and Alex Fish doesn't even play in it.
Expeke has not been inconsistent. He's won every single season of LCS. I think that's it.
No, I think he's won every single season of LCS. I can agree with you on that. But if you see the play that Fnatic has had throughout this, like let's say this split in particular,
Sure.
his play has been inconsistent.
Okay, we Crumbs has brought up the word consistency,
Yeah, I mean,
inconsistent. It's become like signal noise to me right now. I need to get into this, okay, Monty. Well, I'm now wondering what Crumbs thinks consistency is, because as far as I can tell, to Crumbs, there's only one team in the history of LoL who was ever consistent, and that was when SK Telecom went 15-0 and won OGN Champions Winter, because they never lost a game.
I mean, it's being able to play
Yeah.
like at one of like perhaps not your peak level, but close to that.
So
in
okay, so
all the
Cloud9
games.
in the previous splits, they were consistent, right?
Yeah, of course. They're
Okay.
able to play at their best level like all the time.
Can you give
That's
me
what-
an example then? And this is a serious question. I'm not trying to joke here. Can you give me an example of a team who weren't dominating, but they were consistent? So, for example, okay, maybe they only were in the middle of the pack, but they were consistent at that. Like they got the most out of their skill set, and they were able to be consistent. Is there one that comes to mind? Is there one now?
Curse.
Yeah, I
Curse,
see
not
that,
this
yeah.
season, but last season.
Curse last split.
Yeah.
They got about the most they could out of their team, and they similar level in most of the games.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Crumbs.
mean, it doesn't mean like being doesn't mean that you're gonna win. Like,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
doesn't mean
sure.
shit. You could be like 0-30. You're gonna be pretty consistent doing that.
Yeah, you can. Well, dude, in that case, Fnatic are incredibly consistent. They won one game, they lost one game. They won one game, they lost one game. They won one game, they lost one game. Won 2 games,
I mean,
they
that's
lost
not
2
something
games.
you want to look forward to
Okay,
as a
yeah.
player or as a team.
Why do you need this consistency so much, Crumbs? Did your
Because
dad
it's
leave
something
when you were
I
a kid or
strive for
something?
that.
You were like,
I
I just
want
needed
it.
someone, a presence in my life that's consistent and please come back. Like what? Why is this such a obsession for you? Why is consistency? Why don't you just try to be the best in the whole world? Why consistency, Crumbs? Why is that what you want?
Well, because I want it because I see myself play some games in a really high level. I'm thinking, shit, I play this really well. Why is it that there's such a discrepancy between these really good games with these really bad games? So, of course, I want to be able to lift those poor games to the level that I'm playing in the other ones.
Monty, name me some consistent junglers
Well, we already went over a bunch of
with
them.
white skin.
Okay, let me think about this one.
Okay.
I think Dexter has actually been very consistent.
Oh, well, what a surprise that would be. Yeah, okay. Sure, yeah.
He has been. I mean, he was at Worlds last year, and he's been performing since his debut. I think he's performed pretty darn consistently.
Does Dexter live up to your aspirations of consistency, Crumbs?
I could see that, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else who's white, who's consistent?
Who's
I think
white?
I think Cyanide is relatively consistent, but I just don't think he has the highest skill ceiling in the world.
Does Crumbs have anyone he can add to this list? Consistent junglers who aren't Korean?
Does Chinese count?
Yeah, go for it.
I don't know that many.
Yeah,
Chinese
you don't know anything
jumpers.
about Chinese.
Man,
You
but
bluffed
they're-
there.
The
badly.
entire name, you can't even
Yeah.
figure out the names. Like the names, like WE Gigabyte XX, like their names like two letters. Just
No,
completely
their name looks like a
nonsense.
computer virus. It looks like
Yeah, it's
that's like
all
it says like you got a Trojan on your computer. It's like WE Gigabyte WX has infected your computer. Quarantine that shit. Get out of here. Okay, that's kind of what the league scene does every time they go to the World Championship. Quarantine that. Apply Korean antivirus. Updating. Okay, completed. They're done. Patch updated. Yeah, actually, that's true. That's it. I figured it out there. That's why the Korean scene's always behind, because they're the virus. No, the Chinese scene, they're the virus. And then every time we update the patches, that's like the antivirus that holds them back for a little while. And then eventually they come back again, but then a new antivirus comes out. That's why there are a few patches behind at all times. So...
I mean, I'm trying to think of some other players that would be considered like super consistent junglers in the
Like,
West.
here's the thing I don't get about this, okay? Every game I've ever followed, yeah, a lot of the average players who are pros aren't consistent. But the best players, there's a lot of consistency there. Like, you will see these players consistently place top X placing, or they'll have a style of play where even if they lose, they play to their level, but someone plays a bit ahead. It sounds like, in League of Legends, something about the game itself makes consistency hard.
Well, it gets patched a lot. So that's part of it. And also, the game itself changes dramatically after the World Championship every year. I mean, if we look at the differences between Season 2 and Season 3 and Season 3 and Season 4, I mean, this is basically a very different game now. So it's hard to be consistent when Riot is constantly changing what is good in the game very forcefully. You know, Riot isn't about particularly subtle balancing.
Really? They're not about subtle balancing, Crumbs?
I just like to play more junglers. That's it.
Okay, let's have Crumbs' top 3 junglers that should come back. Starting with number 3.
Junglers that should come back. Shit, I gotta open up my client just to look at the champion
Okay.
list here. I mean,
Amumu.
let's see. Rammus. That's
Rammus?
fun.
Okay. That would suit your style of play, actually. That would be like that Nocturne ult that you went on that no one helped you
love
on. You just
playing
pop out with
Rammus.
Rammus. Yeah, okay.
I managed to not get relegated playing Rammus.
Oh, that's an achievement, sort
Oh
of.
yeah. Champion list. All right, let's see. I'd like to see Jungle Alistar come back. That was fun.
Why? Why is Alistar fun?
Why is Alistar fun? Have you played Alistar?
You just want to get in and get these ganks on, Crumbs. You like the light speed ganks.
Yeah.
Oh,
He likes
yeah,
gap
exactly.
closers that you just, there's no actual like aiming
Counterplay.
involved. Yeah, it just happens. Okay, so basically, we've got it there. You want Alistair, and then we're going straight to Warwick, right? You want Warwick, no mechanics, just
No,
lock 'em
not
up.
Warwick. I'd actually like
Oh,
to
okay.
play. Let's see.
Are you going to join I Will Dominate on the Skarner train?
Nah, not really. China loves it. China, it's
I
the
know.
counter to Yasuo. That's their counter, Skarner.
Okay, speaking of China, Javan the 4th.
No, that champion is bad.
It's not that great. Yeah. The thing is, you can't even look for like the mechanics you have for champions in the jungle is practically just the 2 champions that are played right now, Lee and Elise. Like every other champion practically has no skill shots, which is kind of portraying to the role in itself, which is just mostly decision making. Sure, your mechanics are going to be extremely useful for you when it comes down to it, but
Okay.
it's mostly about being in the right place at the right time and knowing how to how to just play the map.
Do you want Nautilus to come back? Are you a Nautilus lover?
No, that's not.
So then, to make jungle more
I-
interesting for Crumbs, we actually just need more jungle champions that are skill shot
Yes,
based.
I actually like Riven. I think Riven at least has the most mechanics out of like most of the other stuff.
So you want more jungle champions that have mechanics and skill shots and...
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, let me ask you this then. In general, people wouldn't describe Crumbs as like a really good mechanical jungler. I mean, they don't say he has bad mechanics. They don't even really talk about mechanics, right? I remember in my interview with you, you told me something like, even though you're not a mechanical player, you spent lots of time practicing that. You even gave me some anecdote where you got your girlfriend to like play in the server and you would just like play in customs and you would just fire skill shots at her with Elise or whatever, just to practice the mechanics. Is this something you're really cognizant of? Like, my mechanics aren't top notch and I have to get them there or something? How do you think of yourself?
I mean, I'm not just looking to have like shit. I'm gonna be like the god of jungle mechanics. I'm just gonna be like, oh my god, the Elise mechanics are amazing. Like, this is ridiculous. Just because I don't think you can get that, like, you can get far with them, but I don't think it's nearly as valuable as your decision making in the position itself. I think it's a solid foundation to have the mechanics of it, and I think it's something that you can use to your advantage very well if you're a mechanically skilled jungler. But I just like to be able to perform in ways that I know I could perform as a jungler, right? Because if you're playing shit like Maokai, right, the 0 skill shots that, again, like practically every jungler that's ever been played has no, with the exception of, Lee and Elise, has no actual skill shots, maybe one, and half the time you don't even use it. You can just bypass it and use other abilities.
Not only, I mean, Dexter, I know, feels very similarly because he has a very aggressive style, and he really doesn't like playing champions without skill shots. Like, he hates playing Nunu more than anything. Hates when I make him play Nunu. Like,
Yeah, like, I mean, before you play Olaf, that'd be like the closest you'd get to skills. Like, shit, I got axes now. Like, even Shaco, like a mechanically intensive champion, you could argue that Shaco's one of the toughest champions to master. 0 skill shots. It's practically all decision making. Like, the role in itself just doesn't have any. If by some ludicrous patch happens that you can play mid laners as a jungle position, you just see mid laners carry, and yet at least be able to do skill shots. But in all honesty, you'd probably still just be playing mid laners that don't even need skill shots.
Okay,
as
so
a
then,
role.
Crumbs, let's bring back Zed in the jungle, yeah? Let's do an insect revival, and you're just going to use all their skills. You're going to be like Bjergsen in highlights. That's what's going to happen with Crumbs.
I see no way you'd be able to make Zed a viable jungler while he wouldn't be taken.
Yeah.
Like, if he's a viable jungler, he'd be put mid lane. There's no way you'd have him
Absolutely.
as jungler.
that's Lulu's problem right now.
You know, when Lulu came out, you know what I used to play? I played Lulu jungle. That was my go-to. I was winning games with that shit left and right. Even though she's blatantly broken, and that had to do with most of it. But I just like playing the champion because I'd be able to. You can outplay people so hard with them. It's like, oh, this is fun. Or jungle Ezreal, right? Like, man, jungle Hecarim. That's like the bane of everything. You got literally nothing. You're just running into people.
How do you feel about Jungle Leona? What if Jungle Leona made a comeback?
I'd have to talk to Nintendo about it.
And then just find out how he's going to play it and then do the opposite.
Well, just in terms of skill shots. Just in terms of skill shots, though. That's a more interesting champion.
that'd be something at least. But in all like your ganks is probably just gonna be flash stun anyways. Flash point blank Q. So
How about Diana Jungle?
that used to be a thing. Yeah, like just anything that has skill shots would be much more enjoyable, I'd say. Like if I could play jungle Thresh, I'd love that.
Every top laner is like crying themselves to sleep on a salt-crusted pillow about the meta, and like they hate having these like the jungle follow and all that. How does an actual jungler enjoy this meta? You like it? Is it interesting?
I think the fact that has like the difference in the meta is just that it's really difficult to be able to just find yourself in a position to outplay the opponent with sheer mechanical ability and just feels like shit, you know what, I was in the right place at the right time, I outplayed this guy, I found him, I killed him, great, I did something that I practiced on, this is great. Because it's all about, well, you weren't able to kill him in the first 3 minutes. Now their entire side of the map has a ward. If you go in there, you're gonna get spotted. You need to bring in your team. It needs to be a team decision to actually find somebody out of position and pick them off. Great, you're able to pull this off. So it just happens. It's just a team game. Like you're not able to do something individual anymore. And if you are, it's basically the opponent's mistake.
Your webcam keeps like going dark and then coming back on again. Is your laptop like dying or something?
No, I'm on my PC right now.
Okay, it's stopped now. Maybe it's nothing. Again, this is another scenario where this sounds like Monty's loving this. Like, wait a minute, like the strategical approach wins out here, and it's not like 1v1ing and outplays and stuff. That's like ideal Monty, right?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I mean, I'm on record saying that I don't want it to be purely that. I think that the 50-50 split between lane swapping and standard lanes is the most interesting for the game. But I do think that the lane swap presents the most strategic depth in anything that we've ever seen in League of Legends. The current version of the lane swap, which isn't just stupid like 4v0 pushing down turrets, but the fact that you're constantly thinking about where the vision on the map is, if you show your jungler or not, when you push the tower, how you control the minion waves, when your top laner teleports into top lane. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to have just a lot of team-based game that you have to win as a team. But I do think that, and you can get ahead of it just by being mechanically superior. But I think that it needs a little bit more about that, maybe a little bit more of just the ability to have just individual, like just that individual factor into the game.
I think that Season 3 Worlds was an example, though, where individual outplay, by the time that the end of Season 3 rolled around, that individual outplay was overweighted, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was way overrated by the game because it was too easy to get large advantages by a solo outplay. Whereas now, perhaps, I agree, now perhaps there's not enough. It's so much about the team play right now. And the decision making that perhaps there isn't enough room for those solo outplays.
Is this more strategical approach suited to Dig? Is this like a good time for Dignitas to have this sort of team? Would you prefer it if it was like the old school and you could just play the lane standard? Which you think would be better?
Obviously, I'd prefer if we had the lane standard, if it was more mechanical outplay. Just if you just look at the lineup in itself, you'd immediately, it would be foolish to say you would prefer it in the strategical level right now, because we're struggling to actually figure out how to play it perfectly in that regard. So we have to work on how to figure out how to win the game strategically and not by the mechanical ability. Had this team been in the Season 3 world, yeah, I think we'd be doing pretty well just by mechanical ability. I think our solo lanes are pretty strong.
When Zion Spartan was in Coast, a lot of people, as much as they praised him for his good games, they criticized him for his bad games and said like his approach was like wasn't ideal, or he tried to carry all the time. And coming into Dignitas, I think he was the player that had some question marks on him. Everyone thought, okay, Shifter was really good in Coast, he'll be really good in Dignitas, that's a good fit. Changing for Skara, who was slumping a bit, that makes sense. People were wondering though, how would Zion Spartan fit into Dignitas? When you first added him, was there some sort of like, did you yourself have a vision of like, this is how he has to play, or this is some of the problems he had before? What did you think on that topic?
I had no doubts about any of the players that are coming into the team. I thought that whatever happened, each player would have the will in themselves to actually know how they should be playing the game accordingly, because they could see the evolution of the game happening and they'd know, look, the game has just changed slightly, like we have to play a different way, like you cannot play the same style that you played years ago or months or just say a couple of weeks ago if you're talking about like a relegation match. So that wasn't an issue going into this new split.
What do you think, Monty?
I'm sorry, you cut out there? Alberto cut out there.
What do you think of them bringing in Zion? Like, has it changed how you think of him as a player? How he's played in Dignitas from Coast?
Maybe a little bit, but I still think that he resorts to some of the same champion picks that he always has, regardless of meta. And I think that he is still too stubborn with some of his picks. I was extremely surprised to see that Dignitas selected Jax after the nerfs against us. Like, really surprised.
Yeah, I think in that, I mean, if you
I don't think that was a good pick for you guys this last week.
I agree. I actually think had we taken Shyvana, that probably would have been a really strong pick.
So I guess I didn't really understand that aspect, and that it concerns me too that he seems to be so set in his ways about which champions he plays, and I think he needs to open himself up to more flexibility. And I think that the meta is drifting away from these bruisers right now into more long-range tank mages. generally speaking. That's what we see in other regions, and as well as in North America. More Lulu play, more Gragas play, more Rise play, generally speaking, and that it's important to adapt to that. And this is not, I think, a direction that Zion has ever really been in before. So,
thoughts, Crumbs?
I think he's much more open-minded as to how the game is flowing than what perhaps picks in this split have been.
okay.
Okay, so if you have this coaching staff in place, you have an analyst, you have a real coach, is this the sort of thing where if Crumbs was to agree now, okay, maybe that pick was bad, does someone actually say at some point in a meeting to Zion Spartan, like, okay, we need to do a different pick there, like, we've got to go a different route, like, don't do that again, we'll do this instead? How much of that goes on, and how much, like, next game can Zion Spartan, if he wants to, just lock in anything he wants again?
I mean, we know what we're going to play. We know what's strong. Like, the thing is, we're all intelligent enough to see at a point. You discuss it beforehand. Look, this is going to be the best pick right now. You have 50 seconds to discuss with your own teams. Is this going to be a good pick? Should we pick this? Like, what are we going to go with this specific style, like, of this champion? Like, what do we need with this champion? Are we gonna do well? Does this help in beating what they have right now? So we're all really open-minded as to what we want to play, and nobody really has their mind set as to, look, I just want to play this champion, this one, and you're not gonna help. You're not gonna stop me. I'm locking it in regardless of what you say. So I think that I think our picks perhaps have been a little bit stubborn, but I think that in no way represents the way that we see the game.
So in the last episode, Monty said something along the lines of, like, he wonders what happens in Champion Select sometimes. Like, sometimes it's planned to do one thing, and suddenly the player just picks something else that they hadn't even discussed and wasn't even on the radar, okay? So I want to ask you... It hasn't
been practiced.
This is why I want to ask you, Crumbs, because there was this feature that Riot did on your team, and in the feature, you're in you've lost the game, and you're driving home in the, like, minibus type thing, and... I'm a cutie pie says, like, we should have just done what we practiced, man, because that would have been, like, really good, and, like, we didn't do what we practiced. And then he wasn't even joking there, he clearly meant it. Like, whatever comp you decided you were going to do, or whatever approach you were going to do, for some reason your team just didn't do it. How could a scenario like that occur?
Yeah, let me just look that up so I can have an actual perfect memory about it, because I remember that's when they made the feature about us for the... Let's see.
But I mean, that happens to, like, every professional team at some point. Like, the players just kind of bungle their champ select.
I think it didn't have to do that much with the champion select at that point. Like, but it definitely has happened to us multiple times to split. It's not something, like, the thing is, you come with a preparation and it happens. Like, it's bound to happen that one or two games you slip up and you aren't able to consistently predict what the other guy is going to throw at you. Like, if the other guy throws, like, a crazy curveball at you and picks something in an incredibly random pattern that you have not thought of, and then you're thinking, maybe this might be good, and you may not have practiced it, and then you have not enough time to actually think it through as to how effective what you're going to do is, then you're going to just eventually fall into some sort of trap. And
that's where I have to jump in there.
Properly.
That trap, I'm confused by that trap. Because the trap, as far as I can tell, exists because of a choice you make, which is that someone throws a crazy curveball at you that you haven't practiced for and you haven't played against, right? Yeah. So if that happens to me, I say to myself, well, since I haven't played against that, I have no idea what the counter would be. So rather than come up with a counter and an entire game plan in 10 seconds right now on the spot, I'll just stick with my game plan of what I was going to do. And if I happen to lose, then I'll figure it out after the fact. And I'll go, right, now I know what that didn't work, my originally planned thing. And instead, here's what I'm going to do instead. Like, am I missing something here?
No, I agree with you, and that's what I think that a lot of coaches wish would happen. Just because by picking something that you haven't practiced in a panicked way, you actually give no information. Like, you don't learn very much about the game because you know that you weren't ready to play a specific way or a specific team composition or a specific champion. And so if you haven't practiced that, it could be equally chalked up to your lack of practice as it could be, a bad matchup or something like that. So I think it's always better just to plow forward with a specific game plan that you have in mind. But for some reason in the booth, and I know this happens to every League of Legends teams, the players just have a mental meltdown and then just do this shit.
It happens to everyone.
Is there a reason why teams don't do that approach, though, Crumbs? Essentially, what we're saying, the gist of it is, isn't it better to have a plan and you all decide on the plan, and then if the plan doesn't work, you find out after the game. You don't decide the plan's not going to work before the game and throw it away, right?
You also have to understand that the plan is made with the entire staff behind the team agreeing to it, right? The staff doesn't get to be a part of the actual champ select. Once the champ select happens, then the team's like, oh shit, well, we don't have the coach to discuss this with, our analyst isn't here.
So don't worry about that. Yeah. Don't worry about that. Just stick with the original plan then, yeah? Why not?
Like the thing, it kind of you're tearing yourself apart. You're thinking, well, if we go to the original plan, is this really gonna work? You're thinking about, and then you just you fuck everything up.
Crumbs confirmed as that guy out of the room. You're tearing me apart.
Well, that's the other thing too. Is I really wish that coaches could be a part of Champion Select. I don't see a reason why they can't be. In Masters here in Korea, in the Masters League, the coaches are in the booths during Champ Select. That's allowed. I mean, my problem with being a coach is that I have no power once the game starts, and I think that's lame. I mean, obviously we can't have timeouts in League of Legends or anything like that, even though that would be great. There's not a real good way to implement that into the game, but I do think that coaches should be there in Champ Select to at least dictate some level of strategy to the teams. And I think that this wasn't possible in the past because every pro team didn't have a coach, but I think it would be a wonderful change moving forward.
You say that you have no power. Are you telling me that you don't perform some sort of voodoo ceremony where you have some hairs of amazing and then you burn it on your cigar while you watch the game? Jungle Mel, bitch.
I don't need to jinx Amazing. He does that to himself.
Okay, I see. Crumbs, when I've done interviews with people and I talk about Amazing, they always tell me he's very good. On his best champ, he's amazing. No pun intended, obviously. But this one game famously that happened is why people criticize him. And listen, maybe they go too far. It was one game where he got completely banned out of all the main junglers now, and he ended up picking Volibear, and it went really badly.
He also picked Zhao against C9.
Do you buy it that is just a one-off and we should ignore that, and that's not the real Amazing, and that doesn't count towards how good he is? Does he have some flaws in that respect? What's your take on him as a player?
I think he's a good player, actually. I think he has average decision making in team fights when it comes to team fights, but besides that, I think that he sticks to the plan and struggles to deviate from it. But if the plan works, I think he's great. So I don't think he's a player that thinks on the fly, that's just able to improvise effectively and just think, well, shit, we're falling behind. What do we do? How are we gonna make a comeback? What do I need to look for to do something effective to get back into this game? I think he's a player that just focuses to what is a plan, and if it works, if he does it, he can execute it effectively, and if that happens, then he'll be fine.
I agree entirely with that, and I think that's what's going to hold him back from being a truly great player, is that he is one of the most inflexible junglers I've ever seen in a position that requires fundamentally a great deal of flexibility.
The team who is bottom of the league right now, Crumbs, Evil Geniuses, they used to have a jungler called Snoopy. And he's one of the most famous players in the history of League of Legends. And once upon a time, he was performing incredibly well. He was finishing top 4 in the world. He was beating incredible teams. He was going toe-to-toe with some of the best players who have ever played the game. Now, his team is bottom. He's now been replaced by Helios. During the split and a half or so, when Snoopy was in NA, was Snoopy even comparable to the old days?
Well, I didn't get to play against him in the old days, at all, barely.
Well, your team didn't used to go far enough in the tournament, sure.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't even get far, that's not even a question. I don't even take that as sort of even
It's not. It's just a fact.
I think that's fact. So
okay.
Yeah, I can relate to that. But I know how other teams viewed him, and they didn't see him as an incredibly strong player. I know that for a fact as well. But I did not get to play against him. I didn't get to specifically look at his play style and know how it was going to be. How good was he? I mean, at the time, I didn't even consider myself remotely good in the game. So I'd see practically anyone being much better than myself. And in the past, when I played against him, he wasn't considered a top player. He was considered one of the weakest junglers in the NA split. So I think his comparison has to do in big part as to how the game simply has evolved. I mean, back then, I barely remember how the game was being played. You'd be able to to solo carry again from just multiple other roles, while you just basically farm it out on if you weren't comfortable making something happen. But as the game progressed and a lot of focus got put into the jungle support and mid lane, the more focus that the jungler had, I feel like he started struggling a lot more with that, because he was required to be incredibly effective to be able to ensure that his team would carry on later.
So with Helios coming into Evil Geniuses now, people say that there's a difference. Like the team looks a bit better, it's working better. Helios is playing better. Do you have any thoughts on Helios?
I think Helios is playing better, and we had the chance to scrim against him this last week, but I think, he performs well on Lee Sin, but I feel like when I play against him, I think he's good, but he seems to have the same inflexibility that Amazing has in his playstyle.
I think that's just that he can't play those champions.
I mean, that's really, like, I haven't had the luxury of playing against that many teams, so just being able to say how good a player is, I'm going to need more time, but just from what I've seen so far, I feel like there's an inflexibility in just being able to adapt on the fly. And in that, being a great player.
Well, I mean, if we look at the teams that Helios has been on, like when we saw him on Blaze, he was being dictated to a lot by his solo laners about what he should do. And then when he moved to Frost and was given more freedom, I don't think he performed particularly well. And then his sword days were pretty mediocre. So I think he's had a run where at his highest peak of success with Blaze, he was not really a big shot caller. And so I think there's still a lot of question marks about his abilities to control a team in the early game.
So the reason why I ask is because actually EG seems to get a lot of props around I'm not sure why. So EG has lost, let me see, 6 of the last 8 they've played, EG has lost. And they've only won 5 games in the entire split. Yeah, and they've only beaten, let's see, they only had a winning record against Cole and Curse. Everyone else, it's a losing record. In fact, everyone who isn't Cole and Curse, they've only beaten C9. That's the only other team that they've beaten. Of those 3 teams they've beaten this split. Why is there any hype around EG, Monty? Do you buy this story that, listen, if you interview a player about one game, he will tell you in that game, no, I can see what mistake I made a mistake there, and that's what cost me the game, and if this guy had done this differently, we could have won the game. That's okay on one game, but if that's like 11 out of 12 games, then you just weren't good enough. You couldn't do what you're saying now. You couldn't execute it either because you didn't know what to do, truly, in the moment, or you weren't good enough to do it. You knew what to do and you couldn't do it. What is your sense for what's wrong with EG?
I think EG's shot calling is really not good. And I think that while adding Helios has improved them in the laning phase, I think that they make just an extraordinary number of mistakes in how to allocate lanes, dealing with pressure, and setting up for objectives. And while I think that Altec and Krepo are a solid lane, and Altec is really young and actually probably pretty developing talent, and I think I would be surprised if we saw him on EG after this year, because I think some like higher team is probably going to poach the hell out of that kid. But that said, Inox is also just really not particularly inspiring up in the top lane, and it comes down to their teamwork and their shot calling. It's really weak.
Crumbs, you want to tell me something about Inox now, don't you?
No, I just thought the wording was actually pretty funny.
Okay.
Not inspiring. I haven't heard that in a while.
He's lackluster.
How does Inox's play move you, Crumbs? Are you impressed by it? Does it make you think there's hope for the new generation, and that in 2 years League of Legends will be on top because Pobelter, Altec, and Inox will have truly realized their CLGTM potential? They will be some of the best players in the region. Krepo at that point will be like fucking Yoda when he was on like the Dagobah system or whatever, and like, yes, I'll train you to be very good, I will. I trained Wicked, Like, come on, man, these guys aren't going to be elite level players, right? Which of these players, these laners? So we've got Altec, we've got Pobelter, we've got Inox.
I think Altec could be a very
2 years from now, Crumbs, which of these players will be around still and will be top players?
Out of all of EG?
Yeah.
I could see Pobelter and Altec.
And where do you think they're going to be in that kind of time?
Word, I think 2 years. I mean, that is a whopping time, but I could see them being at the top of the maybe not like the best players in in their respective roles, but I could see them at the top because especially right now they're both very young. So once they're able to actually refine their talent, they're going to be able to perform very well.
So it's not talent that holds EG back.
Well, I
don't think so.
I think what's really interesting too about EG is that in Crepo's latest interview with Travis, he said that like Yellow Pete and Stupe weren't really helping with the team, which is a little bit baffling to me. Because I would have thought that those guys would be valuable resources. You have a veteran AD carry in Yellow Pete teaching potentially a very new, a new AD carry in Altec, and you have a guy who has played at the highest level, like Stupe, as well as a jungler. And you'd think that he would be able to provide some of the analysis and coaching for the team that they seem to be lacking at the moment. So it's a bit confusing to me to hear Crepo say that on an interview. I think Crepo's best path, and he said he wants to be a caster, but he would also be, I think, quite a good coach, just knowing him personally. He's a very level-headed guy, mature, well-spoken. And I think that he could do well in that environment should he choose.
I mean, I don't think that surprises me though, because we don't. I mean, personally, I don't know the exact details as to the departure of both Snoopy and Yellow Pete.
Oh,
so
they're still in the house.
Yeah, I know they're still in the house, but I don't know like the terms that they left off on, right? Like that maybe they just like, look, we're kicking you out. They're like, well, shit, I'm just gonna stay in America. Like maybe that's what happened, right? Like I don't know if that's the case. Or like, hey, look, are you interested in being a coach? We want to bring somebody else into this. Like, how do you feel about this? Maybe that's like I don't know the exact situation. So,
well,
I wouldn't be surprised.
It just seems to me that since they are not owners of the team, EG, and what is their function in this gaming house right now? If they're not going to coach and they're not going to help out with LCS prep and they're not going to help with planning, then why are they there?
I mean, that I don't know.
That seems like that. Frankly, that seems to me as a coach like a distraction.
It just
and I say this, with no hard feelings towards Snoop and Yellowbeat, who I love them both, but just as somebody who looks at the health of a pro team, they no longer serve a purpose.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, but without the exact details of the situation,
Of course.
Every team that's really good in League of Legends, their identity is defined by who the star player is. Which role is the star player playing? What is his style of play? You tend to build the team around that. So that's how you know what your identity is. You know who to recruit to cover his weaknesses, what he isn't as good for. It makes sense. Okay, it's the same in every sport, actually. That's how basketball teams are made, hockey teams are made. In Evil Geniuses, if I go from the top position to the bottom position, is there a single player who is top 4 in NA at his position?
Maybe Altec.
Yeah, that I could see that one. Maybe
Who's he
Altec.
better than? Who are the only 3 people better than him at AD carry?
Double lift.
Yeah. So you're already fucked because there's I'm a Cutie Pie, Sneaky, and Wild Turtle out there. But keep going.
Yeah, that's true. No, I mean, I personally, it's
you think
hard.
Altec's better than Wild Turtle, don't you, Monty?
No, I think he's better than Cutie Pie.
Crumbs. Altec is better than Cutie Pie.
I'd disagree on that one.
But Turtle, it's hard. Why I wouldn't say I'm hesitant to say Turtle is because Turtle had such a horrible start to the season that he just hasn't been looking the best either, generally speaking.
So okay, that means in neither of you can actually. Okay, even if Monty has Altec 4th, Crumbs has him 5th, right? Because there's Sneaky, there's Double Lift, there's Wild Turtle, there's 3.
Yeah, I'd have him 5th.
And Cutie Pie. So okay, you got him 5th. So the best player on Evil Geniuses is 5th best in his region.
Crepo would be top 5 as well.
Top 5. Well, we said top 4 before. Okay, top 5.
Yeah.
He's 5th now.
Well,
so the two
4th or
best
5th.
players, the 2 best players in their whole team are 5th best in their region. And now, as a bot lane, these 2 best players, what would their bot lane be ranked as out of NA? Do you think, Crumbs?
Let's see.
We've got the CLG bot lane. We've got the C9 bot lane. got the Dignitas bot lane, got the TSM bot lane, got the LMQ bot lane.
I'd rank
Curse bot lane.
I'd rank them
below the LMQ bot lane.
Yeah,
Or like
so
at the same level till below.
So which bot lanes are they better than? Complexity?
Curse bot lane, complexity bot lane.
There's two?
and Dignitas bot lane.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay,
I'd say
so
Of course, you wouldn't say that.
so follow the logic. Follow the logic here. Let me put these 3 facts together, and then I want to ask you a question. So we've just identified that the 2 best players in EG are their support and their AD carry, who we're ranking as the 5th best out of 8 in NA.
Optimistically, that's my ranking.
Okay,
I mean, what is this ranking even about? Their last
You ready?
place in the split.
are you ready, darling? Please. Once the 2 best players, not only that, play in a duo lane, and their duo lane we just ranked 6th best in NA. If these are the best players in your whole team, haven't we just identified that there's a lack of skill level in EG to be a top team?
Yep.
That's not even.
Am I missing something, Crumbs?
No. What the results show it. What?
Okay. So what would, if you were the general manager of EG, which position would be the best to upgrade, do you think? Like, who could we bring in immediately, someone, and potentially make the team better?
Top.
You need to bring somebody to actually get the decision making. That you need
So
to.
you want a shot caller, yeah?
Yes, you need to like. I'm bringing some sort of sports psychologist. Bring somebody to change the mindset to the game. Like, just change the idea as to how they're playing the game, change the decision making, and then from then on move to actually making individual roster change. You've made a roster change with Helios. The decision making still seems to lack. Skip making another roster change. Change the mindset. Change how you're actually thinking about the game. Change the macro game. Change how who's thinking about the next objective, who's reminding people to do this, to do that. Once you get that, and if you have that down and you're still struggling with the same problems you had before, go for roster changes.
I think the most interesting change to me about Helios was the fact that they wanted to upgrade a position that requires shot calling, and then they bring in a Korean player whose English isn't very good. And I think that, of course, over time he'll get better. But if we look at CLG and our decision to bring Seraph in, we made that decision before we knew or understood what the current top lane meta was going to be, with these very complex communications about how and when to teleport and what the status was and control over the minion waves. You have to understand that this started like after we had brought Seraph in. And had we known that prior, perhaps we would have made a different decision about our top laner. I think we're in a good place now, but it took us a long time to get there with Seraph, because of the communication issues and because of all these shifts to the top lane meta that happened. It was hard for every team, but it was like doubly hard for us because his English wasn't anywhere near as good as it is right now. Now, what's puzzling to me about EG's change is that they knew what this like top lane jungle follow meta was going to be, and they still made this decision. But perhaps felt like they didn't have any other good options to bring in junglers.
Here's the thing that confuses me, Monty.
I think perhaps they didn't even consider that.
Maybe.
Here's the thing that confuses me. So the rep that Crepo and Snoopy had was that they were the shot callers. They were the brains of CLG EU. That was the way it was presented. And you would think, okay, if that's true, then if you want shot calling, keep those players. They're the players you keep. If anything, if you've got the shot calling in place, well, we know what we want to do, but we can't do it. Therefore, we've got to find people who can do it, which means we need better laners who can do it. Which means that the players that need to be replaced are whichever of the laners you decide aren't playing up to performance to do what the shot callers want to do. In that scenario, that's why I don't like the kind of changes that EG did. Okay, maybe EG is doing better as a team, slightly, but the reason why they're not winning more is because all they've done is taken away some shot calling, added a little bit of skill in, and they're still not as good as everyone else, so that hasn't changed it enough. It's like I always hate in Counter-Strike, we have a really big problem in the scene, where when a team is doing badly, they'll remove the least skilled player and just put another more skilled player in there. But that's the same scenario, because it might not be that the player who was the least skilled was the one who was losing the game for you. Maybe your most skilled player isn't skilled enough at his role. Maybe the guy who's okay, so think about in basketball. You can't just remove all the defensive players if your team doesn't score enough points. That's actually a counterproductive way. Maybe the guy who's your main scorer doesn't score enough points. Maybe you need to upgrade that position. Or you need a secondary scorer who can score more points at the moment where he's just a defensive player. Like, This concept is what's puzzling to me, because to me, removing Snoopy and removing Yellow Pete says to me that EG at some level think, okay, Inox is fine, Pobelt is fine, but Snoopy and Yellow Pete, you're the people that we can upgrade and that'll make the team better. But I don't think that that's been shown to be true.
I think that the Altec change was definitely a good decision. The Snoopy change is kind of a wash. Like I'm like what you said, I agree. You sacrifice perhaps a little bit of shot calling for and a little bit more skill, just based on the language difference. Now over time, perhaps when Helios's English gets better, and for all those people saying out there like Helios's English is better than Seraph's, that is not a true statement. Helios is just a much more outgoing person than Seraph is. So.
People also don't seem to understand. I'm getting sick of this thing about Koreans having good English. I'm an interviewer. My job is to meet Korean people, talk to them before the interview, then talk to them in the interview. You know why every single foreign interview has a translator, even when it's a player who in theory knows English? Because there's a big difference between being able to listen to English and speak English. Those are two totally different things. There's an even bigger difference between being able to read English and speak English. There's a lot of players in different countries who, if you talk to them in Skype, in text, they can talk to you all day long. You'll think they're really fluent, but you try talking to them verbally, where they have to just listen and speak, and either they can listen but not speak to you, or they can say some stuff, but they don't have the vocabulary to speak. Like, there are actually very, very few Koreans that it would be worth having for the communication. Like, that's why I actually agree with people saying stuff like the Macnoom to CLG. Because at least the idea we're going there is, we already know he won't be able to speak that much, but we're hoping he's so skilled that it's still better than whoever we'd get who'd speak English, right, Monty?
Right.
What do you think on that as a general topic? Because we see Koreans going around the world now, moving to different regions.
Yeah. But mostly they're more amateur Korean players or pros that have really fallen off pretty drastically. So there's that aspect of it. I mean, we haven't seen any like top tier, like Flame's not going anywhere, right? So,
God willing. So,
I mean, I hear the Koreans are doing just fine in Brazil. They're just crushing the scene.
Yep.
Making bank, being praised.
I think if you ever have
stream numbers,
if you ever get kicked out of Dig, Crumbs, I think you should go down to Brazil and get like a pimped out place like in Rio. Just play with some shitty team, dominate them.
Get some Latin honeys.
I'd go to the Latin server, not the Brazil server, though.
Okay, so you just go to Miami then. Okay, you're like LeBron James. You're taking your talents to South Beach.
No.
I need that ping, bro.
Hey, he's going back, though.
Okay. So, let me ask you this question that I've asked almost everyone we've had from NA on the show. If LMQ is doing this well in NA, and supposedly in China, they weren't even in title contention to be the best Chinese. They were like a million miles
they're like the
from it.
sixth best Chinese team or
If
so.
they're doing so well in NA, but they were so bad in China, does that make you concerned for how the level that the Asians could be at when you come to face them?
Obviously, of course. You'd go into the world's match if you're going up against the top Asian team. You'd see it almost as like a David versus Goliath match, but you still have to prepare for it, and you got to face it with whatever you think is going to be able to take them down. So, no matter what, any Western team that faces any Asian team is going to be the underdog.
If I had millions of dollars, and for some reason, listen, Dignitas doesn't work out this split, and Crumbs doesn't have a job on Dignitas anymore, so when he becomes a free agent and legally, with all the Riot rules in compliance, and his contract is terminated, I wait till the contract is terminated, I approach him through all legal means, I'm not in any way tampering, I come to Crumbs and I say, listen, I want you to come to Europe, and I'm gonna pay you the top salary in the world, come and play in Europe. Would you ever move to Europe as a region if it was a good scenario like that?
Yeah.
You're not someone who just, under all circumstances, you just want to stay in NA no matter what.
No, I don't. Of course, I'd love to go to you. That'd be sick. I'd be able to actually just the fact that you'd be able to just see the game in a completely new light, and just tackle the same issue of beating an Asian team from a new perspective and bring what you know and combine it with another region would be a very positive environment to actually have a shot at Worlds once again.
At the moment, CLG and LMQ are top of the league. then Dignitas, and then Solo mid, then Cloud9 and Dignitas are tied for 4th. Who would your 3 picks for Worlds be at the moment, Crumbs? Who do you think are the 3 that it feels like these are the 3 that are going to get it?
I'd say...
Like, who's number 1? Is there anyone clear-cut, like, this team's definitely going to Worlds?
No.
I wouldn't say so. The fact that playoffs is best of 5 as well makes it so that I feel like you're not going to have that random chance of just winning for like a sheer good day. So I think that it's just a matter of who's going to be able to prepare. Like the top 5 is practically even the teams that get buys, I don't think are guaranteed at all to go to Worlds. Like you need to be playing very well when playoffs come around to be able to go to it. But I think the top 5, like those aren't changing. Those are going to be the ones that are going to go. 2 of those are going to get left behind. But I don't see Curse, EG, or Complexity making it. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. I think.
Okay.
I definitely agree. I think that right now my picks are still Dig, C9, and CLG. I'm wondering if LMQ can play in a best of 5. I think they're good in the best of 1 format, but I think that if you can play multiple games and ban out key champions against them, and you can get into a rhythm of not letting Zhao Weizhao farm his ass into the late game, then you're okay against them.
So who are your 3, Crumbs? If we put you on the spot, who would you pick?
I'd pick the same 3 Monty picked.
So you're not going with LMQ, you're not going with TSM?
Just because I actually agree very much so with the point of beating them in the best of 5. I think that the best of 1 environment puts a lot of teams that have... I feel like a lot of teams have a way of tunneling to their picks each week, or just even tie weeks together. Just their general play style seems to be very similar, even champion picks. So if you're able to find that pattern, like the first 1 or 2 games in the best of 5 scenario, you're able to quickly pinpoint that and just capitalize on it. I think that I'd take my chances in the best of 5 against many teams, just because I feel like our champion pools, as to what we practice, is very deep. So we'd be able to come up with new ways of just tackling teams that just have very, very small strategies going into games. Now maybe they can actually come up with multiple plans into a best of 5 scenario during playoffs. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, I feel, I guess, confident. I think one of CLG's strengths going into playoffs, especially if we have several weeks to go about it, is that I think that, at least from my perspective, and it could and probably is biased a little bit on this, but as far as teams go, I feel like CLG we're pretty not predictable in terms of our picks, because we're constantly debuting new champion picks, and I feel like we change our picks the most week to week out of all the other teams in the LCS, so we're less predictable in that regard.
How predictable is CLG for Dignitas?
Yeah, our priority list changes substantially every week.
I agree. I think our priority list changes. There's not a single week that our champions are. It's like we have to play the exact same thing we played last week.
But I think that LMQ's priority list is pretty much always the same.
And they're top of the league.
Yeah, well, they play those champions well. It's true.
No, I'm just saying, but they are top of the league.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't seem to matter, Monty.
Some teams are like that. Well, I'm saying in a best of 5 over the course of the playoffs. Okay. I think that changing picks within within a best of 5 series and having that depth, I think, is an advantage. That's why I'm saying it.
Crumbs, who do you think is the best team in pick ban phase at the moment?
In pick ban phase?
Who's the smartest? Who has the best? Like, they always come up with something clever. They get a little edge on everyone somehow.
Wow.
I actually don't think there's a clear-cut best.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I think every single team has fucked up their ban significantly in multiple games. Same with picks.
Jeez Louise.
Like, yeah.
So all man, 5 teams are just identical. Yeah. I mean, fuck me. Yeah.
They're all bad. Okay. Like, what can I tell? We've all made like the dumbest shit you could do in picks.
Who's made the least dumb mistakes?
The least
Cloud9
dumb mistakes.
Probably.
Yeah, probably Cloud. Like, they stick to what they want to play the majority of the time. Like, they don't actually pick something that's like, well, we fucked up huge. Like, our picks make absolutely no sense anymore. That's something. At least they're able to maintain a team comp that is coherent, so they're able to have a team comp, right? Most mistakes the team makes is like, well, we just pick 5 random champions that don't actually have any synergy or even have anything to do in this meta.
Monty, I have never seen Samsung White, Samsung Blue, SKTK have a scenario where they totally fuck up the whole comp and they get nothing they wanted and they don't really, it doesn't have a coherency to it. Am I wrong?
I'm trying to remember any games.
Even if they get one pick that's not optimal, they still at least pick it for a reason that makes sense. Like they know what they're going to do with this and they know what the overall comp is going for.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, so it's either
how can
it's
Crumbs be
rare
telling me that all of the top 5 NA teams are doing this mistake and yet these top Korean teams, they're not doing
part
it?
of being a better
They're
team, man.
better.
But they're way better. Like, what do you want?
So where's that coming from? Coaching?
Great question. Possibly.
Coaching, I think I'd say better coaching, better practice, better regimen, better routine,
Yep.
just practically better in practically every regard.
Yep.
Better.
Crumbs,
I'm telling you, when you play this game professionally, you got to put with the solo queue shit that happens in North America. You would not believe the shit that goes on. Like you go into it and you feel like you may go a day into so you're like, oh man, I have a free day. You know what I'm gonna do? I feel like I want to grind out. I'm just gonna practice solo queue. I'm gonna practice all these new champions that I want to just master for this week. You actually feel at the end of the day that you got worse. Like your mental state got down. Your mechanics decreased, like everything went to shit because of how terrible it is. Like there's just even trying to win and just focusing on getting better is so difficult in just solo queue. Like I really just wish there was a really quick way to just like, oh shit, let's go and like if you were able to, I think we should do this more. Just have all the pros go on Tron and just play that shit out.
I agree.
So
I think that it would be really valuable to have you guys be able to play pickup games constantly on the tournament realm together, but that's up to the pro players and the managers in order to actually make reality.
Why does that not exist, Monty? Because let me tell you something here.
It does.
okay?
It does exist actually.
Okay.
It does happen sometimes.
But that is by
happened,
default
yeah.
what happened in every other team game in Western esports. All the pros just played in their private channels with each other. And the idea is if 2 Dignitas guys are online and the 3 others aren't, then they get 3 guys from TSM or whatever and they play a game, you know. And they play against a team that's a mix of C9 and CLG and they all play like this. And as a result, here's why it confuses me, because if solo queue is nothing like the game at the moment, there aren't these lane swaps and you don't do the jungle follow and all this, then what is the point in playing solo queue aside from just individual skill? It's really bad for practice, right?
I got one word, it's streaming.
Yep.
So why doesn't this exist, Monty? Like a culture of people just doing this in their off
To
time?
be fair, people have streamed the like the pickup games or whatever.
The thing
amongst
is, the
those.
pickup when you play the pickup games, it might as well be solo queue as well. If you actually saw those games, they're practically just solo queue. Like you're not actually if you were to be able to play those games, you'd try and actually get benefits out of them. You'd want to play them as how you would play a scrim almost. Like you just communicate with a new team.
Okay, so we
That's
need
not happening.
pickups, but it has to be people who know each other. Like, okay, you get a player who's a top player from another team who you know, and you agree, like, we're going to do this at the beginning of the game. And it's like a pickup game, but listen, a pickup game doesn't have to just be like all 5 players doing whatever they want. You could have friends that you play a pickup game with, and you know what you do, and you have a strategy, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's just not happening. Like somebody has to step up, and honestly, this whole thing has given me the idea I should just start this shit because honestly,
do it.
playing solo queue, I'm telling you, it's a completely different game. The things that you practice in it are not going to work in a scrim. It's not the same game at all. It looks the same.
I've been saying this for
wild different.
years. I've been saying this for years that like people are like, well, Monte Cristo's not a good player. I'm like, what the fuck is the point of me playing solo queue? There is literally no point. Do I need good mechanics to be a good coach or an analyst? No, I need to watch as much film as possible to understand the professional game because it is literally entirely different. Like solo queue is the biggest waste of my time as a coach that can ever be imagined.
So if we go forwards from this, at the moment, gradually the deadlock is breaking at the top in NA.
Maybe.
In 2 weeks
Till
from
next
now,
week.
Does it go back to being tied again, Crumbs? Are these teams now starting to pull away?
It's probably going to get tied again.
Yeah, I would think so too, actually. It's interesting, though, because in terms of strength of schedule for the remainder of the season, there actually was an interesting article that I saw on Reddit that was like just kind of trying to say, like, rate the strength of schedule based on the plus minus win ratios of the teams that everybody has to play that's left.
Okay.
And, CLG, we actually have we have one of the easiest schedules for the rest of the season. So that's encouraging from our end, at the very least, because, we've played more of the kind of like top teams at this point. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
You've played everyone 3 times except EG, who you've played twice.
We've done the same, and we've only played Curse twice, so I think that the schedules are pretty relatively the same for every team.
You're right.
Okay, and TSM has played everyone except LMQ 3 times, and they've lost twice to LMQ, so maybe they have a harder schedule, TSM, actually.
Yeah, they should have a harder schedule. But, I mean, that makes sense just because the way the quadruple round-robin worked, TSM has consistently played the easier teams first and the harder teams later, so it wouldn't surprise me to hear that they had a slightly harder schedule.
Crumbs, if I was commissioner of LCSNA and I tell you for next split, I've decided I'm going to change it. We're not playing 4 best of 1s that are spread out. You're going to play 2 best of 2s against the same team. Would you prefer it?
4 best of 2 best. Yeah, I'd prefer.
So still playing 4 games, but you play 2 in 1 week, against the one team.
Yeah, I'd take that. I think the best of 2 format, like just the best of 1 format in general, just has so much of that random factor that you can just say, well, shit, you got stomped, and then you lost to this silly mistake. I think that can not really show you who the better team is. And if you go by just an entire split of the individual best of 1 format, you could have multiple of those, which may not necessarily show the team's strengths, which I don't think is a good basis as to a whole split.
So let's actually talk about what Riot released regarding the format changes and their proposed goals, because we haven't discussed the changes to the LCS and these details. But what I assume, and I have no inside knowledge of this whatsoever, I assume that the change to the format will be as follows: with 10 teams, it will be a double round robin for 20 games in a regular season instead of a quadruple round robin with 8 teams. And that should be really quite nice, right? Or 20 games, it should be 18 games, actually, with double round robin, 18 games. So that would be great, actually, for us, because I think it gives you more time for specific opponents to prep. Super weeks will be gone, and super weeks, from at least a coaching and playing perspective, are fucking awful. Because you can never prepare for your opponents properly. You kind of just have, first off, you have like a shortened amount of practice time to practice in, so you get less practice for more games and more opponents, which is incredibly
Makes no
dumb.
sense. I mean, you go into Super Week thinking we have to come up with one strategy that's going to be good enough to serve 4 people,
or you focus on like 1 or 2 teams and then are like totally unprepared for the rest of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so stupid. So it's great that that's leaving. And then they've also said they want to expand the playoffs and change it into best of 5s, which means probably we'll have a weekend for each stage of the playoffs, so teams actually have a week to prepare for their opponent, instead of you being in a best of 3 and then another best of 3 and then maybe a best of 5 at the end, where it all happens in 3 days and you can only prepare for your first opponent. And if you get seeded into the second round, you can maybe guess who's going to win, but maybe you're not prepared for that opponent whatsoever because the wrong team won. Like, the current LCS format, I mean, we've talked about it a lot on this show, is bad. But this new format sounds really good. So the other thing that they can do is actually start waiting the spring split to have some impact on Worlds via a circuit point system, and we will have solved nearly all of our problems.
Monty, I don't want to shock you here, but all these things you're talking about, these sorts of ideas of how to structure, weren't invented in 2014. These concepts, some of them existed over 20 years ago, how to structure things. So what do you think has happened over 4 splits that have made Riot decide this is the way to change things now? Why would they have the original format, and why would they change to now? What's happened to them?
I don't know. Why would they, why is the All-Stars format, why was that good this year? Why is the Worlds format actually good this year? And by the way, the Worlds format is almost identical to a Season of Champions in Korea. The only difference is I think the only difference will be, instead of playing 2 games, like a best of 2 with points, the double round robin will be, you'll play 1 game and then maybe a different day play another game against the same team. That's literally the only difference. I don't know. I think that obviously, I think Nick Allen being hired and changing the formats of a lot of this stuff helped, and that they've beefed up the people who work in the esports department in terms of format planning. But it's miraculous that all of this stuff is changing into what in other regions of the world has long been considered a very strong format. We've talked about this, I referenced it earlier, but Best of 5 is the format that League of Legends is meant to be played in. It is the best format. Best of 3 sucks unless it's double elimination. It's not enough games. Best of 7 is way too long. Best of 5 is that perfect sweet spot for this game. And there have been like Western teams coming into Worlds this year have virtually no experience in best of 5s because they are never played by Western teams.
Crumbs, the only best of 5 you've ever played was
relegation match
series, right?
Yep.
How long have you been a pro player, Crumbs?
2011.
Okay, so 3 years. What do you think about the best of 5 format in League of Legends? Do you think it's the most fair way to play the game?
I think so. I think the best of 5 format is the best format you can do to decide which team is better than the other one at the time. If you win a best of 5, it's completely certain to say you are better than this team.
I agree. So why do you think it is that Riot, you in your 3-year career, in all of the tournaments you've played in, you have only played in one best of 5? Don't you think that's weird?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, you want to have it. It's easier to plan for and spectate a best of 1. Imagine if you had a best of 5. We went to playoffs and you had best of 5 of 80-minute games of Complexity Curse. How would you even prepare for that? Would you even have enough food for the people?
Well, given the way that some of those teams feed, I would think that there would be. So.
That's like if you count in the time in between each game, like let's say you have drawn out 5 games of those, you're looking at close to 6 hours for one set.
Sure.
It happened. That happened in relegations in Europe last time.
That is the most extreme example possible, though.
And it's really rare that happens.
Yeah,
like,
but I mean,
that eventuality isn't worth giving up the upside of the best of 5.
The thing is, you have to be prepared. Like if you're broadcasting it, you have to practice. You have to be prepared for the worst,
sure.
And that worst is really fucking bad.
I mean, let's go the other way then. If you have a best of 3, the best of 3 could be over in an hour.
It could be over in an hour.
And then you wanted to broadcast for 4 hours, but now it's over in an hour. So show's over. Here's a quick shot telling you stuff that he thinks about the game, and then we end of the show, everyone. That's the end.
Exactly. That's why when you have one best of 1, it's way easier. Like you pretty much predict it to be like, let's say an hour. If it doesn't go for an hour,
sure.
You can fill it with analysis in between the game, and you can do all that. And I think
I'm not saying that best of 1s are bad for the regular season. I'm saying in an elimination round, best of 5s is the best for playoffs.
Yes, by far.
So I'm not saying let's run best of 5s every week. And sure, okay, there's one best of 5 that's 5 80-minute games. That is such an extreme outlier in League of Legends. I think that's happened like once, and that was that weird EU relegation promotion match that happened before this season, where it was like a 7-hour best of 5 or something like that.
Which series are you talking about here?
Wasn't it NIP's series?
Oh
no, because that was a 3-0,
so.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh no,
maybe another.
You mean the Millennium one?
Yes.
Oh yeah, the
NIP
Millennium.
versus Millennium. Okay.
The NIP versus Millennium was I think a 7-hour best of 5
minute games. Sure.
Yep. So, but yeah, that is something that really, really rarely happens in League of Legends. And for the most part, best of 5s are very entertaining and keep people around because like the changes in strategy between games and the shifts in momentum are really quite fascinating. So that was very, very interesting. And I think that it continues, but it's baffling to me that it took so long when we've seen the effect of the best of 5. Now, you could argue in a best of 5 scenario whether blind pick is indeed the best way to play League of Legends. Personally, I love it, but I understand also the arguments against it. I do not understand any of the arguments about best of 5. For me, that's an unarguable point. If you had to play blind pick in a 5th game, how would you feel about that?
I think it'd be more of a toss-up. I think it'd definitely have way more. I think the best of 5 last game being blind is more reminiscent of the best of 1, and just as to the random factor that you have of just getting completely caught off guard and losing for something that there's no way you can prepare for.
Well, I think that it forces you to kind of have a team composition that can be flexible yet still strong.
Yeah,
which I think is just I think it's a different skill.
Yeah, I think it's a different skill at all. I think it's great to spectate. I think it's really fun and all that, and I would not argue against it in the sense that we should definitely not have it. I think it's pretty much optional. I think if a team wins a best of 5, whether the last game is blind or not, that would not change my opinion regarding the winning team being better than the losing team.
Okay. I mean, I like I said, I really like it, but I just don't think it's necessary. And I personally, I kind of like that there's a difference in best of 5s, like at Worlds where it's not blind pick, or at other tournaments, and how it's like a weird Korean thing that happens. Personally, I enjoy it, but I also don't think that blind pick is necessary to the integrity of the competitive scene. Like, I feel that best of 5s are definitely.
See, the problem there, Monty, is that now that Riot have announced they are changing to best of 5, now magically you won't find anyone who has an argument against best of 5. But I can guarantee you, if we had this discussion 1 year prior, obviously I can't, because no one from Riot's ever allowed to talk in a fucking interview because they can't be trusted to open their mouth, have words come out of their brain that could make sense and not come from the conduit of Riot hive mind. So ignoring that, I bet you, in fact, from my knowledge of how they answer things, I'm willing to bet most of the LCS casters would have argued against you and had a reason.
No.
I don't know what the reason would be.
D-Man has said publicly that he thinks that best of 5. Because I was railing about this last playoffs, and D-Man said on Twitter to me that he thinks that best of 5 is the superior
Okay, so we got
format.
D-Man. There's one. You think Freak and Jat would have said, no, you're right, Monty. Riot's system is wrong. They don't know what they're doing, and I think best of 5 is wrong.
I'm not speculating what other people might have said, because I never talked to them about it. So
I think Freak would say. I think Freak would agree. I've talked to Freak and Jat, and I think both would agree that best of 5. I actually think most casters would agree that best of 5 would be the better.
I've seen these debates happen on Reddit, actually. I once saw a debate where
involving the casters?
Freak said something along the lines of that the reason why best of 3 is okay is because the best team will win in a best of 3. Now, the logic there is actually circular, because you've defined a best team by whichever team wins the best of 3 is the best team. Therefore, the best team wins the best of 3. So you haven't actually said anything. That's a tautology. It doesn't make any sense.
But I've seen that as the best of 5.
Well, that's the argument, is that why do you need it? Best of 3 takes less time. The best team still wins, right?
That's not even an argument.
No, it isn't. And my argument against it, I made the argument against it in this scenario. It was me arguing with him. And I said, well, by that logic, since you don't want to play best of 5 because it takes more time and you think a best of 3 decides the winner, then I can use your same logic and I can say, let's play best of 1. Because the best team will win the best of 1 in your logic, because we're just defining whoever wins is the best team. Therefore, I've saved you even more time there, Freak. There's no need anymore. Just have best of 1s the whole way. And obviously, what's funny is in that scenario, they'll be like, well, don't be ridiculous. No, don't be ridiculous the other way. Best of 5 isn't impossible to schedule for. It's not like it's too long. Because what happened was, here was the argument against best of 5, Crumbs. When I said, but the better team will win in a best of 5, this is the real argument that was given to me by Freak. He said something along the lines of, well, then let's just play triple elimination best of 7, because that'll decide the best team, which is like, well, that's such a stupid suggestion, because you did just suggest something which has a time factor which couldn't be scheduled for. Whereas I'm suggesting something that in the real world could work. It's working right now in Korea, and it's provably better. Obviously, I agree, best of 99 with a 17 quadruple system would be better. But the difference is, that's not even in the real world, is it? Let's keep our debates in the real world of things we can actually debate and we can do the merits of. Because that's how an honest debate works. And when both people want to hear each other's side of view, that's what they do. They don't give really extreme example. Just to get... Listen, Monty, you asked me, I had to just tell you what happened.
With this debate that you had with Freak. But
this sounds like it got a little too far.
Yeah, listen, you pushed me.
Regardless of what... To switch back to the actual topic at hand... because I don't know what Freak's opinions are on these issues.
What would be beautiful is if we lived in a world where we could talk to these people.
I would like to point out that the casters don't have any power over the OGN format, and I doubt that the casters at Riot have any power over Riot's format either. And I have my own problems with OGN's format. For example, I don't like how we don't have a scaling circuit point system where the winter champions, tournament is worth the same number of circuit points as the summer one. I think that's stupid. But hopefully that will change. GPL, I think, actually has the best system in place right now because they do have a scaling circuit point system. But regardless, to go back to best of 5, I think the best of 5 is unarguably that point. And to talk about it in the context of Riot, it's putting the teams in the LCS at a disadvantage because coming into Worlds, which is now all best of 5, you're going to be throwing a bunch of teams in there that have literally zero best of 5 experience. And we could have spent the last 2 years developing teams that understood how to play in a best of 5, but now we don't have that.
Monty, I've got the analogy that will explain to you why Riot is this way, okay? Because I've kind of asked you indirectly when I said about the fact that these tournament systems weren't invented this year. What I'm kind of suggesting was any expert could have told you this is how it should be, best of 5 in the playoffs, at the beginning of LCS. They could have told you at the beginning of LCS, here's the reasons why this is a better system, here's other systems of it working and how it works, and look, can you see
and
this
by
is
the way,
better?
by the time LCS started, there had already been 3 seasons of champions.
Okay, so my point here is that it's not that something amazing has happened in the world that everyone has had to realize, oh, best of 5 is really good, and Riot just was like, oh, and we've also realized best of 5 is good. No, the only ones who didn't realize best of 5 was good was Riot. So here's my analogy, Monty. You know the Mormon church had these rules that said polygamy was part of their religion, okay? And also, you weren't allowed to be a Mormon if you were a black person, actually. Well, what happened was, eventually, it got outlawed that you weren't allowed to be a polygamist. You could not be married to multiple people at the same time, mainly for like tax reasons and legal reasons of how marriage works as like a legal contract. So what happened was the church, at the same time as it was outlawed, said, you know what? We've realized something different about the scriptures. Actually, it's not mandated that you should be married to multiple people. That was like a misunderstanding, and we figured it out now. And then, obviously, eventually, like, civil rights people came along and they said, listen, that's bullshit. If someone's black and they want to join your religion, they have to be allowed to. This is America. You're allowed to do that if you're free, you know. So again, this religion, which supposedly they thought it all through, they had all the answers from God, said, you know what? The light is getting brighter. We've come to a realization. What God really meant was that black people now should be allowed to join. You see, what's happening here is you're making it sound like you had a logic that came internally that made sense, whereas really what happens is eventually when the entire world is like, this makes no sense, you are wrong completely, you eventually realize, oh, actually it'd be politically expedient for me to just say that this is right now and change my opinion. And I think I've explained it for you there, Monty.
You know, I think that the acceptance of best of 5s is not similar to the acceptance of black people
Into Mormonism.
being Mormons. But
I do in the light of that analogy, you could also say the other way, which is that mistakes were made and now these people realize that there is a better system after experimenting with something else.
by the way, I'm gonna have to chime in and say that I'm gonna have to go to bed pretty soon.
Yeah, this is the end of the show, mate. We were already at this point where we're like questioning shit Riot did 4 years ago. So, have you only got any final words? I'll give you one. Here's the final note we'll go out on. Unless a playoff series lasts longer than a fucking episode of Summoning Insight, you're doing it wrong, Riot. If it can end in half the time of a Summoning Insight episode, you're doing it wrong. I'm just telling you right there. Any final words, Crumbs?
No, I got nothing to say, and it's fun.
Thanks for being on, Crumbs.
Yeah, no, I loved it. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, mate.